Hello? I think I'm here. All right. Put my glasses on. Hello, everyone. Hello. Let me see if I can find my clip that I used. There she is. Okay, why isn't it not letting me add her? Okay, why isn't that working? Waste the hours with talking. It's twisted games we're playing. Okay. Mary, I'm not getting that add Mary thing. Hold on one second. Let me try her up here. Yes. Okay. Here we go. I was getting scared there for a minute. There she is.
Yay!
I was getting worried there. I was like, I can't find a little add Mary. All I can see is delete you, and I don't want to delete you.
Get her out of here!
Get her out of here! Oh my goodness.
I love it. I
Let
love it.
me
Well, we
zoom
are here.
myself down. All right.
Yay!
Sorry, I'm a couple minutes late today. You guys, I'm gonna just like not make any promises because we are having major thunderstorms here today, right now.
Ooh.
So hopefully
That means they're probably
things.
coming up to me tomorrow. I should
Is
probably
that what
look.
that means?
For those of you who don't know,
Um.
Angela's, of course, in New Jersey, and I'm in Rhode Island, and frequently those summertime storms will come on up. So I'll be prepping.
Oh, it was crackling. It sounded like the end of the world out there.
Oh
I'm trying to
no.
find my clippy thing that I have because I figured out why that was making noise every time it hits my chin. It was. You know what? Maybe I'll just tuck it. I don't know what to do. I'll just
You need one of the
maybe some.
fancy newscaster lavaliers, right?
Well, yeah, that's what I need. Like I had it hooked with an earring. Yeah, last time I
Ooh,
put a little earring in, it worked really good. I had an
smart.
earring
Yeah.
clip, but I don't know where my earring is now. I should have grabbed it before I came on. I had it
Well,
up
everyone who
here,
is
so I was.
joining in, feel free to say a little hello and let us know where you're tuning in from so we can let Angela find her little clip. And I will, let me just see if I can see everybody on my computer. I've got two devices, just like Angela. We like to juggle all these devices and make sure that we've
Yes.
got all the bases covered. So let us know where you're tuning in from. Once again, let us know if this was your first time reading this novella along with us, as it was the first time for me. And let us know for fun what the weather is where you're at. We have just
I just
severe
have to be
humidity here in
careful.
Rhode Island. It's crazy.
I'll just have to be careful with it. Pay
Oh,
attention.
okay.
Because I'm not finding anything, unfortunately. All right.
We've
I just
got
can't get to.
Jane,
I'm gonna have
Diane.
to
Hello,
tone my
Ellen. Hi,
Italian
Donna.
down, Mary. My Italian has to get calmed down so I don't
Oh
gesture
my
as much and
God.
make the thing fling around. That's what it is.
Oh
Um.
no. Yes.
All
Hi,
right. Let
Ruth.
me
Ruth
get.
is saying it's hot and windy in the Texas Panhandle. Hi, Ellen. It's so humid, not surprised with rain. Donna just had the severe thunderstorms too in Maryland. So a lot of people on the East Coast, they are feeling what you're feeling, or they had it earlier today. And Donna says it's going to be rain almost every day in Boston. A scorcher. It was a scorcher today. That is right. That is right, Donna. And Karen in Sweden had a lot of thunderstorms there too.
Oh, did she? All
Yep.
right. Let me.
Yep.
All right. Let me mute this. Okay, that's good.
Hi, Carlotta. Hi,
Yeah. Keep.
Tiffany. Thank you so much for tuning in. Hey, Connie. And Lori, how's it going? Leanna, Janine, so good to see you here. Tina, Marsha. Marsha says it's hot in northwestern Arkansas. Woo! I believe it. Yeah, it
Woo!
is. It's been in the hot 90s with an extreme humidity. So that's what I was thinking. I was
Uh,
like, this is what it must be like in the muggy
it's been
South.
really, really humid here too. Really humid.
Yep.
Um, okay, so let me get up to where now that I'm all situated. Thank God, I threw a shot of vanilla vodka in my.
Ooh, I should do that next time.
I
Maybe.
have orange. I have orange creamsicle water ice with a shot of vanilla vodka in it, so it kind of tastes like a whatever that is.
Yeah, an extra creamsicle. You got a little extra
Yeah,
creamy
like
creamsicle
a
right there.
yeah. um, so hello to Hive. Sorry for all my discombobulation today. And how are you guys doing? This is the Beehive of Outlander Cast Book Club. My name is Angela, and I am a blog writer for Outlander Cast blog, and also I lead the Beehive Book Club on the book side of our platform. Um, and this is our last part of our space between um, study, which has been
Oh my
fantastic.
gosh, it's been so
Um,
fun.
and but have no fear because we have another retail to follow. It's
Mm-hmm.
called A Leaf on the Wind of All Hollows. It's the story of Roger's parents. It's one of the very shortest stories by Diana, and so we'll cover it over 2 weeks. And it's actually going to be, I mean, like on Audible, that's a 2 hour, not even a 2 hour story, where this was a
Yeah.
4 hour and 15-minute story. So it really like still works out okay as far as the same amount per time. And I'm going to take the last 15 minutes or so today to introduce the story to you, kind of get you what you're supposed to have known going into the story. Um, so go ahead, Mary. I have something there for you.
Yeah. Hey, everybody. How's it going? My name is Mary Larson. For those of you who do not know me, I'm the co-creator of Outlander Cast. Started off just a little podcast and became a blog, again, became communities. And thankfully, you know, Angela has really helmed this amazing endeavor of going into all of these book discussions. And so she's invited me to be here. And man, have I been so happy with this ride. It was such an awesome, awesome story that we just all got to share together. If you are joining in now, and you've missed the earlier sections, Dinna Fash, we have you covered. There are a couple of ways that you can rewatch the previous episodes of these discussions. You can find them actually in the announcement section on the event tab of the Outlander Cast Clan book club. Those of you who are joining here live, yay. And those of you who are watching on YouTube later, don't worry, you can head on over and request to join that group. Once again, it's the Outlander Cast Clan book club, as well as watching all of these on YouTube, so you can watch all the replays. But as I said, if you're on YouTube, come on over to our Facebook group. We got a lot of fun things going on there, and then you can join the live discussion. So we're so incredibly happy to have you all here. As I said, see where everyone's tuning in from. Tony says it's hot in Memphis, humid with the heat index warning. They're saying it feels like 105 to 110. And Kimberly Charles is a 10-year-old Great Dane who's just panting and drooling right now with all this heat going on. So everybody's feeling this heat, Angela. We get it, girl.
So the Beehive is a reading community that's working through a long prep of bees that's coming out in November. We just recently started Moby. We're actually cruising down to we have the second to the last of the first section coming up on Sunday, chapters 19 to 22. If you're watching here, you have to join the Facebook club page, book club page, in order to see that one. The only one that's on YouTube, if you're watching on YouTube, is the one with Mary here for space between and for the novellas. It's like a special thing we're doing. But normally you have to be on YouTube, on our Facebook group in order to see any of these. Um, every past live study event that we are doing, make sure that you hit going on all of the Beehive events, whether you can be there live or not, because it's important to get the extras updated when we get the extras out, and also in case we change. Like today, I had to start 10 minutes late. I went on and said 10 minutes late.
It's
And so you
easy.
guys weren't all going, where is she? Where is she? So every past live is over the last 15 months or so that we've done, including our Lord John study, Echo in the Bone, the Moby that we've done so far, plus this study, and all the associated extras that go with each one are located. If you go to the Facebook Club, Outlander Cast Book Club Plan Book Club page. We got one too many words in there. Every time I change over it,
No.
every time. Um, anyway, you know the one. Go there, hit Events tab. Then when you get to the Events page, click on the top to Past Events. Scroll down to the bottom, and you'll see our very first one. I believe it was The Brotherhood of the Blade. Was our first story in the Lord John books. So, and you could just kind of go right on up and follow it and everything else. If you leave comments, I'll get an alert. I'll come and see it. So don't worry about that.
I love it. Well, of course, this is the wrap of this particular story. And after we break down this here section, we're going to share some overall impressions and any wags we have for bees or the rest of the series. So when we do, we're going to also take 15 minutes or so to give you your take on your burning questions or your inspired wag. So if you want to post a question or wag for feedback, you can post them. Just start it with a bee emoji, that little cute little bee emoji, and you'll want to do it like closer to the end of us chatting,
We'll
just
let
that we'll
you
see
know.
it, so we won't have to scroll the entire way. Exactly. We're going to try to
Right.
address as many of them as we can. We will let you know when to start posting them, of course, and then Angela will take the last 15 minutes or so to introduce our next novella, A Leaf on the Wind of All Hallows. So we want to make sure that you mark your calendars. I'm going to tell you, Alexa, remind me about November 21st. Because that is a date you want to have down in your calendars. Oh my gosh, mine just went off. You want to make sure that it's in your calendars, so that way you are here for the big party coming up. There's going to be more information posted about that soon in the event page.
Right. And just to now we don't really have to worry about it so much today because we're at the end of the story, but our spoiler policy, just to reiterate, is that during this novella series, you're free to discuss all the other books, the Lord John books, how this impacts the future. We can talk about bees, but we can't talk about what's coming in the novellas. Now we're at the end of this one, but that's going to apply for Leaf on the Wind of All Hallows, so do not talk about that book now, okay? Or what's happening in the end of that book next week. So Mary, is there anything else you want to announce before we start?
Just wanted to remind everybody to make sure that you're also following the Mary and Blake Facebook page. We do a bunch of other podcasts and blogs. Today, Blake came out. He's starting to feel a little bit better. He's been quite sick this summer, so he was able to tackle a chapter of Voyager. So if you're a member at jointhenerdclan.com.
I saw an alert for that. I was like, as soon as I'm off tonight, I'm going to go listen. I've been like starving for him to continue on that. I can't wait.
I know. That was his first thing. He's like, this is what I get to do. So he's so excited. So if you are a member there, that's our Patreon community, jointhenerdclan.com. You can join for as little as $2 a month, but you get these bonus extras. And they're not as regular as you would like them to be, just because sometimes life gets in the way and we already have these pre-scheduled things we definitely have to do. But as Blake is starting to get better, he is able to tackle that. So I just want to let everybody know.
Okay, it's feedback time, Mary. Let's have you start with your couple, and then I'll give you mine, and then we'll get going.
Awesome. Salima from England said on the replay that she can't believe we are near the end of the story. This week's section, meaning last week that she gave it, was a 4.8 from her. She said that her good was Mother Hildegard. She is such a great character, so I enjoyed seeing a little more of her in this section. In my head, she's like the Dowager from Downton Abbey. Ooh, I like that. And also Joan's Beauty and the Beast moment. Oh, yes. The bad was Charles Pepin. What a cowardly, weak, pitiful excuse for a man. Yeah, we are not a fan of Chucky, right? Exactly. And the great Michael being so pragmatic and understanding when Joan shares her secret with him. She hopes that we hear more about Michael and Joan and bees. Fingers crossed. All of us are crossing our fingers and our toes at this point. So yes, I am so much looking forward to that. What about you, Angela?
Well, I planned on saying this in our beeswag thing, but I'm thinking that it's possible. Not now. Diana has said we're not going to actually see Michael and Joan in bees. Okay, we're not going to like see them physically. But I'm thinking that this story, when this story ends, it was probably like Beltane or close to it.
Okay.
When they went into the underground tunnel and the end of the story when they disappear.
Yeah.
Because that would be the end of April, and I figure that's about where we are. That's probably why it was all charged up too, you know. So in 1778, and our
that's
bee
when
story,
this is 1778 April.
1778 end of April. our B story picks up in June of 79. So, hey, that is just over a year. So maybe a
Yes.
letter will arrive at the Ridge announcing the nuptials of a certain wine merchant and former nun. Let's hope.
Yes. Oh my gosh, crossing
So here's
fingers.
here's where and here's where you get the layers, Mary. Because if you hadn't read this story and that happens, you would have just blew right by it. It wouldn't have mattered a diddly squat to you.
No,
And now
no.
you'll squeal with joy when you read that.
Oh. And if it doesn't, we're all just gonna write it and we're just gonna pencil it in on the
Pencil
side.
it in.
And then a letter came in. Yeah.
Mail call.
Yes.
You have your next one.
Yes, Donna Teresa Leonard also replied on the replay. She said the scene between Michael and Mother Hildegard is gold and makes this section 5 honeypots for her. Mother Hildegard knows all. If Joan and Michael do not get together, we are all going to need therapy, writes Donna. Then she adds, if Joan and Michael get together, Jamie will be her dad and her uncle, which is
Typical
awesome.
Family relations in Outlander world,
Right? Exactly.
Absolutely.
Why not? Mary Hughes, who is joining us live on Facebook, she wants to know what WAG means, Angela, before we continue, since this is going to be something they've
wild ass guess. WAG. Wild ass guess. So it's basically another word for a crazy theory.
Which we love. Which we love to delve into.
I'm a prognostication queen. And your last one there, Mary?
Janelle McKenney says she wonders who in the Fraser Murray family will be the most surprised if or when Joan and Michael get together.
What do you think?
I think Leary.
Oh, good one. Good one. Wow. I didn't even think of that one. Wow.
/ man, he's so much like Jamie, you know. Yeah. That's what I think.
Oh boy.
How about you?
Like,
I know your brain just got like.
I am thinking. I like yours better though, but I was thinking Jamie because he was so proud of her being a bride of Christ and all that. He's going to be like, what happened? I gave you this dowry. You gave my dowry to this church, and now you're not even going to be a nun.
Right.
What did you do to her, Michael? Did you flower this nun?
You know what he did to her.
Seriously. But we all love it. We all love it. So I have a couple here. I have one from Carlotta. She says, good. And then she says, for amusement purposes, she says, according to Joan, there was nothing better for steadying the nerves than cows. Sadly, there are no cows at the Comte house to help relieve her anxiety.
True.
Bad abduction is pretty bad. Charles' suicide is equally bad. Best, Michael's growing concern for Joan. He is displaying the beginning of heroic tendencies, and they just continue this week.
Oh, they sure do.
That's right. And then I have Karen Meyer. She says she loves Michael and Joan together. I think in a year they will choose to be together, and all the mystical, magical stuff is awesome for the big picture of the Outlander universe.
I keep bringing it. Keep bringing it.
She adds that she thought it was interesting that Claire kind of adopted emotionally both of Leary's daughters.
Yes. Oh my gosh, so true. Once again, Leary will be shaking her fist in the air.
Oh, she will. She will hate it. She was like, the woman's just taking over everything.
Oh my gosh, exactly. And yeah, I totally picture Claire being like, it reminds me of Jamie. I totally get it. I would stop being a nun too. Yep. Can't blame her.
And lastly, Mary, there was a lot of chatter on the board drawing comparisons between Jamie and Claire pre-marriage to Michael and Joan. But like how he would kind of look at her and not want her to know he was looking at her, and just all these different things. And there's a few more of those this week that I'm going to bring out to you. Not only does he, Janine Whistler says, I get a huge Jamie vibe from Michael. Not only does he look like Jamie, but he also has his father's level head. She also says Michael wasn't overly surprised about Joan's voices because he's been raised with this type of supernatural life and belief from his mom and with what he learned about Claire.
Agreed. Yeah, this is just the norm for him.
Yes. All right, Mary, before we break down this exciting, intriguing ending, how
Yes.
many honey pots do you give part 5?
A big 5. Give it all. I'm so in love with how this wrapped up. It was such a fun story, and I want to thank you, Angela, so incredibly much for leading this discussion and for asking me to join, and particularly, kicking off with this story, as it has been such a fun summertime read. You know what I mean? Like, just
Oh,
just
yes.
really interesting. So
I
that's what
knew you
I'm
would like
giving
this
it.
story because you love all the wizardy stuff and all, and I knew
Yes.
you would like that.
How
Um,
about you?
I also give it 5 honey pots. It hit all the things I love: the surprise, excitement, poignancy,
Mm-hmm.
insight, intrigue. It had heroism. It has a little bit. It had the humor, and there was a good sign for the future for Joan and Michael. So it left you like whirling with possibilities and questions.
Yes.
And I definitely need to work into my vernacular Saint Jerome on a bannock.
Seriously, I underlined that and I was like,
I
this
loved it.
this may
Where
be
did she
Jesus
come
H.
up with these
Roosevelt Christ.
things?
Yes.
The new Jesus H. Roosevelt Christ.
Like that rivals it because it's easier to say.
Saint Jerome on a bannock.
Oh my
I love
gosh,
it.
right?
So your good, bad, great for this section, Mary. Let's hear yours.
My good is just hanging out with Joan and seeing her wit. You know what I mean? It's been such an
Hmm.
evolution for us to be able to see her. I mean, we've always had those little comments that she's kind of thought, but to see her actually vocalize a lot of it to the Comte and to even Michael, it's just been wonderful hanging out with her. And I think that she was an absolute, bold, brave, very Claire-like woman in this bit of the chapter. My bad is that I'm just mad that I don't know where Master Raymond and the Comte went. I know
Yes.
that that's a foolish bad, but I'm just like, that's
No,
it?
it's not.
Where'd they go? How did they just go together? What? Yeah, so as I know many of us
Dun, dun,
shook our fists
dun.
in the air, exactly. And then my great was Michael Murray. All that kept
Mm,
ringing through my mind was, I need a hero. As he's like
yes,
coming down the tunnel, like with the different
yes.
colors.
With his little
I just
penknife in his hand.
yes. Oh, I loved it. I loved it. So,
Me too.
and
Me
honest,
too.
that's really my great is Michael Murray being the hero with his penknife.
So mine is my good was very tough to narrow down this one. I need to go with Master Raymond. I am loving his whole like snarky Yoda like vibe.
Yep.
He's so great, and he's just so like cool in this book. And
Yes.
he gets the comp all twisted, like all
Mm-hmm.
perplexed, and he's just Mr. Cool, Mr. Snarky.
Yep.
I just love it. Um, for my bid, I put too many unanswered questions. And I mean, this can be a good thing as well
Yes.
and a bad thing because it's good because it makes your mind keep pondering things
Mm-hmm.
after the book's done and possibilities and trying to fit it into other things. So that's a good thing. It sparks the imagination. It's also a great mark for a short story or a novella. But you do kind of feel with this book that you want some more resolution somewhere.
Yes.
You know what I mean? On
Yes.
something. Give me a firm answer on something. I mean, it's like Joan and Michael are a good possible, but maybe,
Yep.
and we don't know where the Compton Raymond. It's like you kind of
We don't
are a
know what the
little in
voices
limbo.
actually
You're
were.
like, yeah,
Yeah.
we don't know why she's screaming like like in panic. Don't do it when they disappear.
Yes.
There's like all these like things, and we go, okay, we need part two.
Yes.
We need, space between part two. Or maybe they're all lost in the space between now. Who knows?
Yeah.
Um, but it is good because in the positive, that's good because it leaves you with teases and opens and stuff. And that's what you're supposed to be doing with these bulges.
Yeah.
It's supposed to kind of enlighten and make you question other things and filter those things through the main series. So it's doing its job in that way. You know what I mean?
It wet our
My
whistle. Yeah.
great is Michael and Joan, her courage and his heroism, and their draw to and faith in each other. So
Hmm.
that's what I put for my great.
I love it. I love
All
it.
right. So let's break this down. Before we get into it, Mary, I want to point out to you to notice how the writing style changes as we approach the conclusion. Remember, we talked about it being shaped like a French braid. Remember?
Yes.
Okay. Remember, we talked about that, how it's these three stories and they
Yeah.
start out three separate streams and they kind of wind together and then they have trails at the end, which is so true.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but you also, when you have a French braid or you have a braid of any kind in hair, you know how as you get slower, it gets tighter? It
Yes.
gets like, because it's
Because
less
it's
hair, so
smaller.
you start
Yeah.
to do smaller and tighter, and the turns happen faster. You kind of get that with this because you keep getting it turned. Like now, these chunks are like smaller, and you keep
Mm-hmm.
shifting POVs and so forth. And it's almost like Diana's picking up the pace. You have a very
Yes.
quick pace as you're going. You're switching from this person to this person, to this person, to this person, and it creates this ramp, this tension, excitement. It's really great craft by her
Mm-hmm.
to kind of really build in like a ramp up and excitement at the end of the book, don't you think? I mean,
Yeah. Oh no, I
yeah.
loved it.
So I kind of like noticed that because last time, because I'm doing these by sections, and last
Mm-hmm.
time I had the less twice the pages almost, or one and a half times the pages, and like 8 sections. And this time I had like 13 sections or something with half the amount of pages. So it's because each
Yes.
one was so short. So it's
Mm-hmm.
kind of cool. Like, you see how she does that. All right. So C1, we left the story on a cliffhanger, evil girl that I am.
Oh, that was
But
so
hey,
hard.
that's how you go into a finale, right? Don't TV shows, they like leave you
It's
on a
so
cliffhanger
true.
going into the finale. So hey, that's what
Yep.
I did.
Yep.
Um, so we ended with Michael's boot heels clicking, and he goes running out of Chucky's house. Joan was locked in the Comp's lab, I guess, and
Yeah. Yeah.
had knocked out a pane of glass in the window, and she was desperately looking for Michael to exit the house, waiting for him. Then
Yes.
she hears footsteps coming up the stairs and about to approach the door. So she runs across the room, um, sits in a chair, and before she does that, she pushes her rosary out the open pane of the
Boop.
window,
So smart.
and sits down in the chair across the room. And the cop comes in, tells her he has something to show her. She's like, nope, I don't want to see anything you got to show me. And
Mm-hmm.
she locks her legs in place. He sighs, picks her up with her legs still tucked,
Yes.
and then carries her out. But then she breaks free and starts to shout for help
Mm-hmm.
to the window. But the cop quickly covers her mouth and drags her out the door. And she notes how surprisingly strong he is.
Mm-hmm.
So what were your thoughts at this point, Mary? Were you impressed with her keeping a cool head, her resourcefulness and quick thinking?
Oh
Did you
yeah,
think that?
I
Go
was
ahead.
really proud of her just for, knowing like, okay, I'm gonna tuck my legs behind this thing. Like this is just a little country girl who's used to milking cows in Scotland. Like
Right.
she knew, okay, I'm gonna like really plant myself, even though he's so strong and it just, as you said, lifts her up with this claw-footed chair. But she rather than just like break down screaming, where are you taking me? Why? Yeah,
Yeah.
she didn't have that whole damsel in distress, like,
Right.
oh, the world is ending. And no, she really kept her cool. And I think that that's been Joan this entire time. And I see that because she's gone through her own a lot of stuff, just listen to these voices and having to deal with being able to kind of see when people were dying. So I think she just has such a depth and maturity to her that it's like, I'm not going to freak out yet.
Right. Do
Like,
you think the comp is underestimating her a little bit, assuming she's this little naive, meek mannered nun, and like she doesn't have the kind of wherewithal she has at
um,
this point?
either that or he's keeping his cool. You know what I mean? Because
Hmm.
I think to him, when he interacts with these young women or does anything, generally they are probably young and naive and scared. And then, you meet Claire and she keeps her cool, and Gayla's probably kept her cool. So here he is with this woman who has said some weird stuff to him, and she is keeping her cool. So I think to him, it's like, all right, like almost more excitement. All right, if she is keeping her cool, then it is because she's something special. She's not your
Oh, that's
average
an
girl.
interesting way to look at it. That's an interesting way to look at it. I have that Joan is showing a lot of courage and the ability to think on her feet, pushing the rosary out the window and stuff
Mm-hmm.
like this. Um, I think the Comte expects this little meek girl, but Joan is putting up a good fight. She's extremely spirited and resourceful, I think, for somebody that doesn't know much about anything. And as many people said last week, she reminds you a little bit of Claire in her resourcefulness and her spirit to
Yes.
just like face things. And Michael, just like Michael reminds us a little of Jamie.
Hmm.
Did you think at this point that he was taking her to the tunnels? Is that where you thought they were headed when you read this part? Or what
No,
did you think he had planned at this point when he was taking her away? Did you think he
originally,
had evil intentions or just like
yeah,
positive intentions?
I always think he's evil intentions. I
Oh,
didn't
okay.
necessarily think about him taking her to the tunnel. I was nervous he was going to rape her.
Oh,
With all that furniture and everything, and I didn't know if he was going to try to make another mini comp. Um, so when he took her out, I was like, well, at least that's not going to happen there. So I
not
didn't.
there.
I was more relieved. Yeah, I was more relieved they're out of the room.
But on the bright side, we know that Michael did not spend long at Charles's house,
Hmm.
and he's heading across the road right now as we speak, which brings us into the next scene. So Michael did not pause for his cloak. He dashed across the street, pounded on the door, and he spots the rosary on the pavement. So I'm going to play our first clip there.
Our hero,
Our
even though Joan's a
hero.
hero. Yeah, they're both heroes.
Fumed, pounded again, and, pausing for breath, caught sight of the rosary on the pavement. He ran to catch it up, scratched his hand, and saw that it lay in a scatter of glass fragments. At once he looked up, searching, and saw the broken window just as the big
Oh boy.
door opened. He sprang at the butler like a wildcat, seizing him by the arms. "Where is she? Where, damn you?" "She? But there is no she, monsieur. Monsieur Count lives quite alone. You—" "Where is Monsieur Count?" Michael's sense of urgency was so great he felt he might strike the man.
Hmm.
The man apparently felt he might too, because he turned pale and, wrenching himself loose, fled into the depths of the house. With no more than an instant's hesitation, Michael pursued him. The butler, his feet fueled by fear, flew down the hall, Michael in grim pursuit. The man burst through the door to the kitchen. Michael was dimly aware of the shocked faces of cooks and maids. And then they were out into the kitchen garden. The butler slowed for an instant, going down the steps, and Michael launched himself at the man, knocking him flat. They rolled together on the gravelled path, then Michael got on top of the smaller man, seized him by the shirt front, and shaking him, shouted, "Where is he?" Thoroughly undone, the butler covered his face with one arm and pointed blindly toward a gate in the wall.
Thoroughly
Michael
undone.
leapt off the supine body and ran. He could hear the rumble of coach wheels, the rattle of hoofs. He flung open the gate in time to see the back of a coach rattling down the alley, and a gaping servant paused in the act of sliding to the doors of a carriage house. He ran, but it was clear that he'd never catch the coach on foot. "Joan!" he bellowed after the vanishing equipage. "I'm coming!" He didn't waste time in questioning the servant, but ran back, pushing his way through the maids and footmen gathered round the cowering butler, and burst out of the house, startling his own coachman afresh. "That way!" he shouted, pointing.
So the chase is on,
Here
Mary.
we go.
And oh my God, totally loving hero Michael. And you can take the man out of the Highlands, but you can't take the Highlander out of the man, right? I
Right? Oh
love
my
it.
gosh. Going in
Um,
there, shaking things up.
that's right. And I mean, this is a bit out of his element. You know what I mean?
Yes.
Here, he's in hero zone now, though. And the shattered glass, I thought was like this dramatic touch, like you visually with the glass shattering a rosary laying in the middle of it. It has
Mm-hmm.
like this contrast of danger with holiness. It's kind of had that
Ooh.
interesting imagery. Um, and it left Michael with this sense of desperation seeing
Of
that. Like,
course,
okay,
yes.
this is something that this is not good,
Not
not great,
supposed to be
Bob.
here. Yes, yes.
And it's similar to what, Joan felt when she sent her message. She had that desperation, when she put it out there. You have any thoughts, Mary, before we go to the next section?
I
Thoughts
just
on this
loved how
scene?
how fast he was inside that house, you know, doing the almost like wrestling with the butler, and then of course the butler, oh, you know, just kind of giving up. But exactly, you know, we've seen Michael just be kind of like a calm protector, even how he handled, you know, being sexually assaulted by his sister-in-law. You know, he was still like very calm about that. Like, we'll talk tomorrow. Why don't you leave? So here we've seen him in all these different avenues still keep his cool. But Joan in trouble, no longer cool. He's ready. He's ready to go be a hero.
Yeah, taking my glasses off too. So the next scene is in the Comte's POV, and he tells his driver to hurry. Then he kind of sits back and relaxes, and he talks about how his errand took longer than he expected, which has me curious, like, what errand did he do? You know what I mean? It kind of like seems kind of, I don't know.
Why are you saying this? Like,
yes. And here was twilight, you know, which is like that in between time. It's one of those times that's supposed to be a powerful time between day and night.
Magical,
like mentioned before. And he thinks he wanted to get out of the city before dark because the city can be dangerous after dark. And that struck me hilarious and ironic, because it's like, first of all, he doesn't seem like somebody that has a fear of the dangers of the dark in a city of Paris. It makes him look vulnerable, him saying that. And also ironic because he's the danger at this point to Joan. Like, he's talking about the city's dangerous at night, and he's like kidnapping a nun and taking her underground into a tunnel. Like, dude, look in the mirror.
Exactly.
You know?
No one's gonna mess with you right now. They're gonna take one look in that carriage and be like, never mind.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, like, did it strike you that way, like an ironic thing to say?
Oh, completely. It made me laugh because I'm like, what's going to happen? The Court of Miracles are going to come out? Like, everyone who's in the underground, shady areas of this world already kind of know you, and they know that you're bad news, and, you know, there's whisperings of your name. You know, Mother Hildegard even freaks out when your name's being said. Like, who do you think's going to come after you?
Right. So now we know where he's going. Oh, wait a minute. No, I skipped ahead.
But
so
I was confused. Did he, the way that I was reading this, did he not know the entire time that he was being followed?
No, he didn't. He was staying further back. I think he had a jump start on him. By the time he got around, got to his coach, said, follow, you know, that coach had just turned the corner.
Yeah,
and
that's
so,
what I was trying to figure out, if he knew when he was in the carriage and the person. Okay, all right, that made more sense, because exactly, I'm like, wow, he's being just so cool with being followed the entire time. But yeah, this makes more sense.
No, he didn't know, because it was just barely being kept in sight, you know.
Yes.
So he looks at Joan. He looks at Joan, and she looks terrified, and you see him turn on this charm. And tries to put her at ease. And she starts to come out with some very interesting things, Mary. So that's where we get our second clip.
I love Joan.
Joan is a piece of work in this section. I'm telling you. In this week, I'm saying, the stuff that she comes out with. Get me here.
His captive was staring at him, her eyes enormous in the dim light. She lost her posturance veil, and her dark hair was loose on her shoulders. She looked charming, but very scared. He reached into the bag on the floor and pulled out a flask of brandy. Have a little of this, chérie. He removed the cork and handed it to her. She took it, but looked uncertain what to do with it, nose wrinkling at the hot smell. Really, he assured her, it will make you feel better. That's what they all say, she said in her slow, awkward French. All of whom? He asked, startled. The old ones. I don't know what you call them in French exactly. The folk that live in the hills. Souterrain, she added doubtfully. Underground? Underground. And they give you brandy. He smiled at her, but his heart gave a sudden thump of excitement. Perhaps she was. He'd doubted his instincts when his touch failed to kindle her, but clearly she was something. They give you food and drink, she said, putting the flask down between the squab and the wall. But if you take any, you lose time. The spurt of excitement came again, stronger.
Oh,
lose
boy.
Time? He repeated, encouraging. How do you mean?
It's a magic
She
word to
struggled
him.
to find words, smooth brow furrowed with the effort. You, the one who is enchanted by them, he goes into the hill and there's music and feasting and dancing. But in the morning when he goes back, it's 200 years later than it was when he went to feast with the
Shut up, Joan.
No.
It's turned to dust.
She's a nervous talker.
It was. He also wondered, with a fresh spasm of excitement, whether the old paintings, the ones far back in the bowels of the chalk mine, might have been made by these folk, whoever they were. She observed him narrowly, apparently for an indication that he was a fairy. He smiled at her, though his heart was now thumping audibly in his ears. 200 years. For that was what Melisande, damn her, he thought briefly, with a pang at the reminder of Madeleine, had told him was the usual period when one travelled through stone. It could be changed by use of gemstones or blood, she said, but that was the usual. And it had been the first time he went back. Don't worry, he said to the girl, hoping to reassure her. I only want you to look at something. Then I'll take you back to the convent, assuming that you still want to go there.
Yeah.
He lifted an eyebrow, half teasing. It really wasn't his intent to frighten her.
Maybe you'll want to run away with me.
He feared that
Yeah, right,
Mr. Joan.
He wondered just what she might do when she realized that he was, in fact, planning to take her underground.
So now we know where he's going when he says that.
Yes.
The Comte is pumped, right? He's pumped now, you know?
Yeah.
You know, like she said all the magic bells and whistles words, you know?
It made me think, you know, when you get like like when you get a surprise grab bag and you never know what you're going to get. It's like he opened it. He was like, well, it's even better than I thought.
Okay, I don't got blue light, but like she's all with me on the 200 years and the disappearing in hills and time. And yes, we're like speaking the same language, kind of. But notice also, how about his charm? You know, how he's like able to like turn on the charm, and he's, you know, being like giving her little smiles and little teases and jokes and all of that. And I really have a hard, like when I see things like that, I have a hard time keeping that we don't like the whole, we don't know yet for sure if he's Fergus's father, because like he has that Fergus charm, you know? You can see so many little echoes in this book now that he's like more, you get to know him a little
fleshed
more.
Out,
You see his personality and the way he can charm ladies and the pickpocketing and all these little things that are kind of on the lower end of the radar. That's not what you're focused on. But if you're looking at it, you kind of can see little tidbits of Fergus floated in there. So I'm going to be really disappointed if Fergus isn't his child.
I know.
I feel like they're setting up so many things to see that. And, you know, Diana like feeds all of that like genetic
on purpose,
you know, so she's putting that in there. You feel like it's kind of like meant to be like a connection. You know what I'm saying?
Exactly. Yes.
So,
yes.
There are a lot of echoes if you look. So did you believe that he intended to take her back to the convent if he discovered that she was not a traveler?
Ooh, no. I mean, had this happened at the marketplace and she said don't do it and he grabbed her arm, was like, come with me, you know, maybe I would have believed him if it all happened then. But you like went out, abducted her, she put up a struggle, you tell her you're a crazy sorcerer. No, there's no way you're bringing Joni back, because no, I have no idea what he would do with her.
Yes, that's the thing, you know. So I don't think I believe he'd take her back, but he did seem like genuine that he wasn't like, because he's talking to himself, like he was intending. He didn't really want to frighten her. He didn't want to scare her in any way. You know, he assured her he wasn't going to harm her. So I don't know what his intent actually is. I don't think he really intends to harm her per se, you know. But I'm kind of tossed on it.
Like, what would he do with her?
Yeah. We also find out some more that Melisande, aka Galus, told and showed him. You know, we get a little more piece of that here, you know, and we get the impression, I got the impression after this segment that really like she showed him everything. Like
Yes.
everything she believed to start with. Like he didn't have any clue of anything. I feel until she came into his life and showed him these things. Because it seems like everything he's learned, he's like, Gayla said this, Melisande said that, and that's the way it turned out when I did it the first time. Like basically what she said actually panned out
Came
to be,
true. Yes.
And so that makes you think like he didn't even venture into any of this until Gayla came on the picture and basically gave him instruction on how to do everything. And that's what scared me about this entire situation with Joan, because you kind of feel like it's setting up to be an echo of Ian and Gayless in the cave at Abendawe. And I'll get more into that in another couple segments. But you feel like that because he talked about the blood in that little paragraph.
In that piece.
And here you got this nun, this pure blood. She appears to have something, so there's power of some sort to her. She has visions. He ends up finding out. So you kind of feel like, well, if he gets there, and he finds out that she can't travel, she's not one of them.
He can still make other uses of her.
Yeah, will he decide on the spur of the moment, maybe her blood will be what powers me, whatever.
Yeah.
Like, will he do that because that's what Melisande said.
Exactly.
So it does make you have a little bit of fear, and you feel like you start remembering what she did with Ian, so that comes back in your mind. Were you surprised that Joan is telling him all about these fairies? And what do you think her hope was in doing that? What was her intent, or what was she hoping to happen by telling him all that?
I mean, part of me hopes that she was just trying to distract him, but honestly, the way that I wrote it is Joan's just a nervous talker, and she doesn't get to talk to many people. In general, she's just out milking cows, and now she's here and everyone speaks French. And to me, I'm just like, Joan's just happy to talk. But I felt it was because I'm a nervous talker myself.
Yes,
and
me too.
I was really, so I thought,
that I'm sure by now.
Right? I'm like, that's what I would probably be doing. Like, oh, I thought you were one of the fairies, and okay, one of the old ones. Like, okay, I would just be talking, not even with necessarily a plan. So that's at least me projecting it, because that's how I probably would have acted.
Right. I had that too. I said, I think her babbling was from nerves. And she said whatever came to mind while thinking about Claire and the old ones are probably in her head. And I think he was just double checking. But I think this like originally, I think he might have just been taking her to the cave to just see, like as a double check, because he didn't see the glow. But he thought, well, let me see if she hears them. Maybe she just doesn't glow. Maybe that's not in her power or something, because he doesn't really know how that part of it works. He just knows he sees it when he sees another like him. So, but he thinks, well, maybe that doesn't happen all the time. Let me see if she hears the stone. So I thought it was just a test. But now, after all this fairy talk, he's all jacked up. You know what I mean?
Yes.
And poor Joan has no idea that she's just
adding fuel to the fire.
Pandora's box, So you have to give her credit, though. She's in this scary situation, and she's staying very strong. In spite of a very scary situation. I mean, I'd be scared, what I mean? And I'm no little naive nun, you know what I mean? I've been around the block a couple times. So scene 4, I love this scene with Michael. It's like, I'm not playing it, but it's one of my favorites. And it feels like such an echo to Jamie going to rescue Claire from Fort William. Where he went without hesitation, armed with nothing but an empty pistol in his bare hands, right? And then when he and even later on when he says, she's some business of mine, it was very much like, and I have it in my notes, that like when he says, I'll thank you to take my hands off, like it surprises you. It was all like such an echo of that whole bit, from Jamie and Claire. So here's Michael. I love this scene, and he's armed with nothing but all these like weird things, and he's kneeling on the seat. His head's out the window. His wild red hair is flying. He's urging the driver to go faster, and he says like, he wished he had a pistol or a sword, and he takes inventory of his possible weapons, and it's like so pitiful, He has a pebble, a hanky, a rosary,
a dirty
tinder box, a dirty hanky, a tinder box, a little twist of paper to start a fire, a stub of sealing wax, and a penknife. Like, you ain't MacGyver, buddy. You ain't doing nothing with this stuff,
Right, right.
So you like thinks, well, maybe I can make a slingshot. It was such a great little spot. I loved it.
Yes,
Um,
yes.
and I loved
I just
this
love that he was thinking that with the hanky that Joan gave him.
Yeah.
Like, I just love that it was like that he still had that, even though it was dirty, that he still had that hanky on him.
And he held it for comfort. Like, and he held it for comfort. Yep. But it was just so funny. He's looking at this stuff and thinking, like, what the hell am I going to do with this stuff, But he's like, the hell with it, and I love the very end of that little section where he says, Joan's rosary was also in that pocket. He took it out and wound it around his left hand, holding the beads for comfort. He was too distracted to pray. Beyond words, he repeated silently over and over, hardly noticing what he said. Let me find her in time. So your thoughts on this scene and Michael here, Mary?
Oh my goodness gracious! It's so funny because of
Did you
course,
love
like the weapon.
that little scene?
I loved it. I loved it so much. It's funny because as he's going through his list of all the different things he has, the penknife didn't even stand out to me. I was just laughing, being like, this guy's got nothing. Like, I hope he knows Taekwondo or something because he's got nothing. Oh my god!
And he's not a real big physical dude. Like, remember they said that, like that's the only way he didn't really look like Jamie is he's not as big and brawny as Jamie is. What I mean? He's more normal, size.
He's so hyper focused that no matter what, I'm going to go there. I think you mentioned too, like, he didn't have any money because maybe he originally thought like maybe I can like pay him for Joan or something. He's got nothing on him. So just once again, very, very brave. I found it interesting that he was doing all this, while they're riding, because I would be thinking like, you don't even have time to call a friend. You can't like stop and get,
no, you can't
local
stop
help.
You don't know where he's going.
No.
Right. I love that Michael's showing a ton of devotion and courage, and he has no weapons, but he's going for it, and he has it had this little touch of humor, which felt like a big relief kind of as we're ramping up this tension. We kind of needed that little taste of humor right there.
Yeah.
And I think his best weapon is the element of surprise that he has at this point, because the Comte doesn't know he's following. He's totally not expecting Michael to show up. You know what I mean? So that was like the thing he had in his favor, is the element of surprise. And so I loved his prayer that let me find her in time over and over and over again. It reminds you of the Jamie prayer, Lord, that she made me save her and the child. So there was like a lot of little echoes. You know what I mean? A lot of little echoes, little Jamie prayer echoes if you look for them. So now we go to scene 5, Joan's POV. And she reveals even more in this scene.
Just keep up that nervous chatter.
Yes. He's like, this is a very informative ride. So they're riding along, and the Count wants to know why Joan told him not to do it at the market. And she says she wishes she hadn't told him anything, and she's getting snarky and smarmy back with him, and she thinks about whether the Comte is an old one, or she thinks, does he think I'm an old one? And so again, she thinks, like, when she starts thinking like this and starts talking, I'm wincing and holding my face as she's talking. I'm going, oh my God, stop.
I know.
So I'm going to play our next clip here, the first half of it. Get this up. All right, here we go. Come on, play.
Tell me, the Count asked curiously, why did you speak to me in the market that day? I wish I hadn't, Joan replied briefly.
Right.
She didn't trust him an inch, still less since he'd offered her the brandy. It hadn't struck her before that he really might be one of the old ones. They could walk about looking just like people. Her own mother had been convinced for years, and even some of the Murrays thought so. That Dar's wife, Claire, was one. She herself wasn't sure. Claire had been kind to her, but no one said the folk couldn't be kind if they wanted to. Dar's wife. sudden thought paralyzed her, the memory of her first meeting with Mother Hildegard when she'd given the Reverend Mother Claire's letter. She'd said, ma mère, unable to think of a word that might mean stepmother. It hadn't seemed to matter. Why should anyone care? Claire Fraser, she said aloud, watching the Count carefully. Do you know her? His eyes widened, showing white in the gloaming. Oh, he kent her all right. I do, he said, leaning forward. Your mother, is she not? No, Joan said with great force, and repeated it in French several times for emphasis. No, she's not. But she observed with a sinking heart that her force had been misplaced. He didn't believe her. She could tell by the eagerness in his face. He thought she was lying to put him off.
So, so I can't say, I have to say that her lack of French has been a real problem for her, right? So far, what do you think, Mary? Her lack of French has caused her a lot of issues in France.
Yes. It was interesting to me that she like knew to think of this. You know what I mean? It's like her brain was still processing everything, and you know, it just amazed me that she knew to bring up Claire.
Yeah, absolutely. Another question: do you think the Comte fears Claire? And what strategy would you have used in her shoes? What would you have done if you were in her shoes at this point? What strategy would you employ to get yourself in and out of this mess? Would you have just kind of sat there meekly? What would you have done in her shoes?
That's a really good question.
Thank you.
Yeah, I like that.
Inquiring minds want to know, Mary.
Yeah, I probably would have just kept talking like she did. But I think once she really started to talk with him and started to like pick up that this is where things were going. I mean, honestly, I would have just tried to run away. That's what I would have done. I'm not like that
out of the carriage, going at full speed.
I just would have rolled out. Yeah. Because at that point, like, what are we doing? You know, she's in a country that she doesn't know. She doesn't know how to speak any language. She doesn't know anything. She's stuck with this guy. No. I don't know what I would have done. I maybe would have tried to, like, hit him or fight him.
Do you think he fears Claire? He's afraid of her?
I do. I think he is afraid of her.
I do, too. So now she figures the voices have to be less dangerous to tell him about than thinking that she's a fairy, you know?
Yeah.
And I love her sass and spunk here that she shows in spite of being afraid. So that's where we're going to pick up.
I told you what I did in the market because the voices told me to, she blurted, desperate for anything that might distract him from the horrifying notion that she was one of the folk. Though if he was one, her common sense pointed out,
Rock and roll, Mary,
he ought to be able to recognize her. Oh, Jesus, Lamb of God, that's what he's been trying to do, holding her hands so tight and staring into her face. Voices, he said, looking rather blank. What voices? The ones in my head, she said, heaving an internal sigh of exasperation.
Obviously, Joan.
Now and then. About other people, I mean. You know, she went
just
on,
a matter of factly.
Him. I'm a, St. Jerome on a bannock, what was the word?
St. Jerome on a bannock.
Someone who sees the future, she ended weakly. Some of it, sometimes, not always.
John.
The Count was rubbing a finger over his eyes. She didn't know if he was expressing doubt or trying not to laugh, but either way it made her angry.
She pissed.
So one of them told me to tell you that, and I did, she said, lapsing into Scots. I think I ken what it is you're not supposed to do, but I'd advise you not to do it.
Put that in your pipe and
it occurred to her belatedly that perhaps killing her was the thing he wasn't supposed to do, and she was about to put this notion to him. But by the time she had disentangled enough grammar to have a go at it, the coach was slowing, bumping from side to side as it turned off the main road. A sickly smell seeped into the air, and she sat up straight, her heart in her throat. Mary, Joseph, and Bride, she said, her voice no more than a squeak. Where are we?
Lori says Joan is a blurter. Yeah, her and John would be good company for each other, wouldn't they, Lori? That's what we always say about Johnny's a blurter. So poor Joan. Now imagine this, Mary. You know, it's dark. You know, you're like they said, there's hardly any coaches on the road, so like it's all deserted. You're on the edge of this wretched smelling cemetery, you know, with coffins coming out of the ground and everything else. And this man who says he's a sorcerer, that you think could be a fairy, that's now dragging you underground into a cave, okay, into an underground tunnel system in the earth. And I would be scared. She has to be petrified, you know, especially with her naivety and her cultural background of what she believes this is about, you know. What were your thoughts here, Mary? And what do you think of her courage in telling him about the voices? Do you think he believes her about the voices?
I think he does. I do think that he believes her about the voices because there's already. That was a good question. I don't know. Like now that I'm taking it from like a scientific kind of way, yeah, sure, he can believe her a little bit about the voices. But for her, I was a little confused. Is she speaking this entire time in French? Because there was one little bit towards that last part that you played where it said like she was trying to figure out the grammatic way of you know of saying something. So I didn't know how much she was trying to speak. I think the first part she was in French, and then when she got to the point, it says when she got to the point where she's like, whatever it is that you're not supposed to do, I'd advise you not to do it. That part was, I think, in Scots when she was getting all sassy. So does he not understand English?
I think he does. But he just doesn't let her know that, you know. But I think he does. Well, the real Comte Saint Germain knew all kinds of languages. That was one of his claims to fame. So I've been thinking they have been speaking English during this ride, and so for her to have actually been speaking a lot of this in French kind of blew me away. At that point, it kind of you know threw me for a loop. But once again, I'm just so impressed with how brave she is that she's just still hanging on and saying all of this to him, knowing, like you said, she's able to smell it. Yeah, and the thing is, like, this is something she's been afraid to tell anybody. And here's this person who means her harm, that she feels means her harm, that says he's a sorcerer, he's kidnapped her, he's done all this, and she's going to tell him, you know, this thing that she's been afraid to tell anybody. I think because it is
magic, you know, because he said he's a sorcerer. I think that, okay, well, you're a sorcerer and I hear voices. You know, I think it was kind of like,
she figures it was the less of two evils, because it's better that than him to think she's like him and going to drag him into a fairy hill, her into a fairy hill.
Yes.
Were you worried that he would just be further intrigued by the fact that she hears voices and knows the future and all this other stuff?
I definitely
because knowing the future is a sign of a time traveler. You know what I mean?
Exactly. And just kind of having this different element to it, being someone that he's never met before, having those particular type of skills. I think for his mind, who he does all this research and he's thirsty. He's always thirsty for learning more about all of this. You could just you're right there. You're seeing his mind whirling the entire time.
And I was too. I like Joan's saying now that she can foretell the future, which a time traveler would be able to do. And the Comte is probably thinking she's just denying her about Claire being her mother out of fear. So this is all not adding up well for her, that he's going to believe anything she's saying at this point or let her go.
Yeah.
And it's another, like I said, an echo here of Gaelish dragging Ian down into Abendaway. And you worry, or did you worry, that once he sees she's of no use as a traveler, that he might use the fact that she's this pure virgin and she has power, that she'd be a good blood sacrifice, because Melisande had told him that, to juice the power to be able to travel forward. Because ultimately, and that's what Gaelis had planned to use Ian for, because she was trying to go forward, if you remember, when she was going to go forward the brief time. And so it really echoed this here, and it makes the whole thing scarier knowing that Gaelis was his tutor in all of this, and it's really scary because he's trying to figure out how to go forward, and he's the one, and she told him that blood is one of the things that gives power.
I didn't even think
he's his
that.
tutor. You know what I mean?
So
it adds like this whole like, oh God, you know, like, is she in worse? It would almost be better if she was a traveler, at least in a way to save her, you know. And So did it cross your mind, or were you
No.
worried for her in that? Okay.
Oh, the gayless aspect was not crossing my mind. Had it been, I would have definitely been like, Joan, you need a kick and scratching, do everything you can to get away. I think I was so entrenched in this that even though gayless was mentioned, by the comp, that because she wasn't constantly mentioned and because that wasn't like laid out for me, my brain was just so focused on the here and now.
Right.
But now that you're reminding me of all that, oh my gosh, it's even more scary for Joan.
And the thing is, if you weren't worried about it, then Diana makes sure that you remember it in the next section.
Yes.
Because we get to scene 6 and we're back with Michael, and he leaps out of the carriage before it's fully even stops. And he sees where they are, and he tells his driver to talk to the other driver to find out what the comp is up to. And he sees this situation. It's night. He's dragging this virgin nun underground. And in case we weren't worried about that, his mind starts going to virgin sacrifice rituals, mutilation, cannibalism. And he nearly vomits, but he can't because he's running. Okay. And the comp starts lighting torches. And he sees Joan's hair flying as the comp takes her underground.
Yes.
And he wants to shout, but he has no breath. And when he gets to the shaft, he just flings himself down the shaft without an instant hesitation, it says. So he starts automatically thinking of all of these things, of like sacrifice and ritual things that he would be bringing a nun down here to do. So in case we didn't think about it, like Michael's thinking it for us,
Michael's worried. Joan's just telling stories. Let me tell you more about the fairies.
You really see his true care, his desperation and fear for Joan here. You can just see how much she means to him, by the way he's acting. And he's showing so much courage and heart, armed with this rosary in one hand, his left hand, and his little penknife in his right hand, And what are your thoughts, about this scene where he's chasing her down the thing?
Oh my goodness gracious. You
just love him. I love
exactly, without abandonment, and even saying like, oh, driver, go talk to his driver and see if he'll say anything. Like, just having the wherewithal to even just do that little bit. And then to make this choice that there are these scary people out there who do all these terrible things, who, sacrifice people, who are cannibals. And yet he still goes right down in that shaft.
They're saying on the board that he definitely would have known English and stuff. I just think he didn't want her to know what he knew. So in case she talked, and maybe like if she talked and thought he wouldn't understand her, like she might say something else. Like he's playing his part close to his best.
Very smart. Very smart.
So scene 7, we're back with Joan. They're going through all the twists and turns up the tunnel, and the comp keeps asking her if she can hear anything, and Joan's like, no. And again, he asks her again. She says no, So he seems to be looking for her to verify what he's listening to.
Yes.
And meanwhile, Joan isn't sure if the comp will bring her back like he promised. And she just sees they're going deeper and deeper into the earth. It's kind of scaring the hell out of her, right?
Oh my gosh, so scary.
So he stops and asks her to listen again. And Joan asks, well, what the hell am I supposed to be listening for? And so he says, just listen. And so she listens. She hears footsteps, and the comp answers her and says that he hears the stones, and he explains that the stones make a buzzing sound when the calendar date gets close to a fire or some feast. But what's on the bright side here is that he's not hearing the footsteps because the buzzing was probably so loud it's blocking his being able to hear those sounds. So that was like a plus, and Joan hears them stop, and the comp finally realized, it's like, dude, you don't see no glow. She's been telling you this all the time. He finally says, okay, she can't hear the stones. And then he takes her down another tunnel, lights a new torch, which shines on the Blessed Mother, which comforts Joan. She thinks, what fairies would have a statue of the Virgin Mother? And the comp pulls her
Joan.
ahead.
Yes.
The comp pulls her ahead. Now, this is another time where you get nervous because this is where the portal is that he's taking her. That's where the little Virgin Mary was. That's where the pentagram is on the ground. And so, and you see that's what he's taking her to. So you're thinking, okay, she said he agrees now that she can't hear the stones. and or she can't hear anything. You don't see no blue light. Like, she's obviously not this. He finally
She's
comes
a
to grasp
dud.
it, and he's still taking her there. So now you're going,
Hmm.
oh God, what is he
Yeah.
planning on doing? You know what I mean?
Yes. Yes.
So now it's
Exactly.
even more nervous.
Hmm.
Um, and so they get there, something is painted on the floor, which turns out to be a pentagram. His hands are cold before approaching the portal, which I don't know what that means. Do you think that's fear? Like, I don't know what the point is saying his hands were cold. It feels like it should have been somehow significant.
Yeah. To
But
me, I didn't know if it was a mix of either a fear, of excitement, just no matter what, having a rush of emotions.
oh, okay, all right.
That's how I took it.
When he does realize that she can't hear them, what do you suppose he's thinking, and what do you suppose he's planning at the portal, since she's not a traveler? Like, what's his plan B here? What are you thinking it was? I mean, I started to worry a bit, but I want to know what you were thinking. Like, after he's like agreeing, yes, okay, you can't hear them, and then he's still
Yeah.
taking her there. Like, what were you thinking?
Well, to
What
me,
was
he
he
was
was
still
going to
thinking,
do?
well, let me see what I can do with her in this area. Maybe like
Yeah,
I know what happens with me and I know what happens with time travelers, but maybe there's variants of it. Maybe because she's like a voice hearing person and she's still somehow related to Claire, maybe, something will still happen with her if
maybe
I bring
she'll
her
hear it
to
when
this
we get
place.
right there. Maybe she's just
Yes.
not as strong, where she
Yes, yeah,
hears
I
it as
still
strong
thought
as
that
I do.
something might happen because she still seems to have that magical wherewithal and she has her own kind of special abilities, that he was just going to try it anyway.
Right. So now we're back with Michael. This is scene 8. And he's stealthily following along. And note that he notes that they're changing these torches. He has this rosary wrapped in his left hand, like some like little talisman, like his to give him like
Hmm.
courage and strength or whatever against this evil, whatever this evil is going to be.
Yes.
And he has this little penknife in his right hand, and with no plan really, except that I'm going to get Joan out of this somehow, some way.
Yes.
He's lost track of all his turns because they've been like turning and turning and turning. They're way deep into
Just
the earth
following the
now,
lights.
you know. He's
Hmm.
like wondering if he's ever going to even be able to find his way out. That's got to
Yep.
be scary as hell. I would have like serious
Oh
claustrophobia
yeah.
in that
Oof.
situation. Like being like you're being entombed or something down in the earth.
Yes.
No, I'm not a fan of that. I'm not a fan.
No, I would not be going that far. I'd be like, okay, I
Especially when I
tried.
had to go down a ladder to get down into it. It's like not a little cave I can walk into and walk
Yeah.
downhill. For some
Yes.
reason, that makes it worse. Um,
Hmm.
but he's determined to rescue Joan. He steps into the shadows. So now I'm going to like lump together scenes 9 through 12. And so we start back in the Comte's POV. And
Hmm.
we get into this big round chamber, and it's very eerie, and light is barely reaching the walls because it's like this big round space, which makes it easier for Michael to kind of stay in the shadows and not be
Yes.
seen. There's a pentagram in the middle of the floor, which it seems like the comp knew about that, that the
Hmm.
pentagram, he must have put the pentagram there. And the comp's bones are aching. He's in like pain from how
So
bad
loud.
the
Hmm.
thing is so
The
loud and
stones.
so bad. And
Oh,
he's
that's
wiping
beautiful.
the sweat from his hands to avoid disgusting Joan.
And he's got
Um,
his like stones, like, is that, are they vibrating? Is that what
they're like
the,
hot. They're
yes,
hot.
yes.
And he's reacting so strongly. So I think that it's partially because it's close to Beltane, or it is Beltane, which
Hmm.
makes everything charged up more.
Supercharged. Hmm.
And maybe possibly because somehow, Raymond is there in some way, shape, or form, and maybe his presence is emanating energy that's making it
Yes.
higher charged. Do you know what I mean? Or he's feeling
Yes.
it more. So, were you surprised that the comp was concerned about whether his sweaty hands would disgust Joan? Do you think he's really genuinely concerned about like what she thinks of him? Like he was like, for
I
him to
think
even think along that way, like he didn't want to disgust her with his
I
sweaty
almost saw it
hands.
just him being vain. Like I
Okay.
feel like he wouldn't want anyone to see him with gross, sweaty hands. You know what I mean? Like I
Yeah.
think he thinks very highly of himself. It's a part of why he wants to look youthful. And it's like I wouldn't want anyone to see me like be lesser than what I really am.
Yeah. And remember, Madeline said he's usually such a clean freak. Like he's
Yes.
usually about like being cleanliness and stuff was so important to him. So she was
Yep.
surprised that he didn't want her to douche and stuff.
Yes. Yes.
Um, so um, now Mary, the way I'm reading it, now you tell me if you're reading it this way. There's no Raymond there when they first enter this space. They don't like open in the space. They see the pentagram there, so it doesn't sound like there's a Raymond there. Am I reading that wrong? When they first
Unless
enter,
he was hiding. So, you know how Michael's
maybe.
able to hide. And so part of me thought that Raymond was
Well, he's
hiding.
definitely not
Or,
standing there in the middle of the pentagram when
no,
they first walk
no,
in.
no. So, or he like bippity boppity boo time traveled. Here I
Maybe
am.
he turned himself into a little creepy crawler that's on.
Yes. Yes. He
Maybe
was
he's
just
a
hanging on
cat
the
in the
crawl.
corner.
Yes.
Maybe he's like a little black cat in the corner or something, and he's
Perfect.
hiding in the shadows.
Yep.
And then he kind of stealthily walks and turns himself back into
Yes.
Master Raymond. Um, so, and then you know, so suddenly Joan sees Raymond, okay, standing in the center of the pentagram, and what a scene this is, Mary. The Comte is flabbergasted, and before I play this scene, also notice, like you said, the Comte notices that the stones in his pocket felt warm.
Mm-hmm.
And I asked you because you actually brought up, but I have a question here for you: is this the extra energy you think from Raymond's presence, or did it make you think of the scene with Jemmy where the opal heated up when he touched it because he's such a strong traveler?
Yes.
So
Yes.
maybe like being around Raymond and him being such a strong traveler made the stones
At the
around there all get
extreme.
hot,
Ooh.
react with that
Yes.
energy.
Yes.
Um, so again, like Master Raymond is like Joe Cool in this scene. So I just love
As
this
always.
scene and we gotta play it. So this right.
The noise was making Rakutsi's bones
Such a
ache,
good scene.
and often as he had heard it, it never failed to make his heart race and his hands sweat. He let go of the nun's hand for a moment to wipe his palm on the skirts of his coat, not wanting to disgust her. She looked scared, but not terrified. And if she heard it, surely she... Her eyes had widened suddenly. "Who's that?" she said. He whirled to see Raymond standing tranquilly in the center of the pentagram. "Bonsoir, mademoiselle," the frog said, bowing politely. "Ah, bonsoir," the girl
Because that's what
replied
you say.
faintly. "What the devil are you doing here?" Rakutsi interposed his body between Ramon and the nun. "Very likely the same thing you are," the frog replied. "Might you introduce your petite amie, sir?" Shock, anger, and sheer confusion robbed Rakutsi of speech for a moment. What was the infernal creature doing here? Wait. The girl, the lost daughter he'd mentioned. The nun was the daughter. He'd discovered her whereabouts and somehow followed him to this place. Rakutsi took hold of the girl's arm again, firmly. "She is a Scotch," he said, "and as you see, a nun. No concern of yours." The frog looked amused, cool and unruffled. Rakutsi was sweating, the noise beating against his skin in waves. He could feel the little bag of stones in his pocket, a hard lump against his heart. They seemed to be warm, warmer even than his skin. "I doubt that she is really," said Ramon. "Why is she a concern of yours, though?" "That's also none of your business." He was trying to think. Couldn't lay out the stones, not with a damn frog standing there. Could he just leave with the girl? But if the frog meant him harm, and if the girl truly wasn't... Ramon ignored the incivility and bowed again to the girl. "I am Master Raymond, my dear," he said. "And you?" "June she said. Sister Gregory, I mean." She tried to pull away from Rakutsi's grip. If I'm not the concern of either of you gentlemen..."
Smart thinking,
"She's
Joan.
my concern, gentlemen." The voice was high with nerves, but firm. Rakutsi looked round, shocked, to see the young wine merchant walk into the chamber, dishevelled and dirty, but eyes fixed on the girl. At Rakutsi's side, the nun gasped. "Sister?" The merchant bowed. He was white-faced, but not sweating. He looked as though the chill of the cavern had seeped into his bones. but he put out a hand from which the beads of a wooden rosary swung. You dropped your rosary.
Oh, Michael Murray.
I
Little
love
did I
him.
know I needed him in my life.
Yes. So for on my brain,
It's okay.
we back when Raymond appeared, were you surprised to see Raymond there? Like when you were reading,
100%.
where you're like,
100%.
whoa, Raymond's there, you know?
He keeps popping up when I'm not expecting him. And of course, you know, he's been this massive kind of like hidden thing that's happening in the Comte's mind. And we're always wondering, but I did not expect him there. And I loved the idea that you said that maybe he was a cat, because I was thinking like, oh, he could have gotten into the tunnels with, you know, having the animals' night vision. They don't need torches or any of that kind of stuff. So he could have just been in there anyway.
Very good. Oh, I like that. I like that. Good thinking.
Mm-hmm.
And did your fear for Joan lessen when you saw him there? Because you know he's like, did you feel like, okay, he ain't gonna let nothing happen to Joan? You know what I mean? With him there, did it kind of put you at ease? That
it did, because also I felt like the Comte's focus was then distracted, even though the Comte like put himself in between, kind of like, nope, this is mine. This is my virgin. You know,
get your own.
Yeah.
I got dibs.
Yeah. Oh, I loved it.
What do you think of the dynamic between the Comte and Raymond? The Comte is he's usually very self-possessed and in control, but he seems to kind of lose control when he's in these meetings with Raymond. Raymond just comes off so cool, and he's just kind of like all defensive and all like in a fluster. He puts him in a fluster. What do you think of that whole dynamic when they talk?
Oh, I love it. I love it so much, especially because Raymond like is addressing Joan. You know, like she's the important
he's
person
like, okay, he's
here.
gonna be freaking rude, so let me introduce myself, my dear. You know,
I'm just gonna ignore the guy that actually cares about me and has been obsessing about me, and I'm just gonna talk to this little love. Who are you? Like, just to bother him even more, you know?
Yes. And were you impressed with Michael's bravery as he was determined to rescue Joan? Did you expect him to reveal himself that way in this scene? Or
No,
did you think he'd stay hidden and would wait to see what happened, you know, and wait until a proper time? Like, were you expecting him to just step out with really nothing, you know? I
mean,
and jump in the fray like that?
You know, he's jumped in the fray. Like he's been going full steam ahead since this part of the story has begun, from jumping on in and getting on top of the butler and let's drive, let's go, you know, with his little pen knife. So I totally believe it. I think just his drive kept going. But when he said, she's my concern, gentlemen, that is what shook me. Oh,
I loved it. I love that line. And it was, like I said, it was very much an echo to Jamie's rescue of Claire when he said, I'll thank you to take your hands off my wife.
Yes.
You know? It really like hits you the same situation. And like Blackjack Randall going, you know.
Yep.
And okay, so my next question was, how did Raymond get into the tunnel and what's he up to? So you think he came in like through being a cat, like that's what he did?
No. I mean, that's one idea. Or maybe he just like maybe he just traveled from somewhere. I feel like he can travel back and forth very, very easily because that's how I feel. Like in my heart, I think that's what happened.
And I wonder if he's there to do his own thing, or was he there to kind of thwart the Comte and interrupt what he was doing? And I love all the body language between Michael from here on out. Wait a minute. What do you think of Raymond's snark, too? There was like so many questions. Did he find the daughter? You know, because like, you know, he was supposedly looking for a lost daughter, and then they leave this situation. So did he find her? Like, what's going to happen to Melisande now? Like, there's so many questions that I like want to know.
She's pregnant. Seriously. Does she still get her house? Is she still cared for?
She ain't getting squat. Like, that's what I mean. I feel bad for her. You know, what's going to happen to her now? Are we going to see her again somehow? You know, I don't know.
I just hope she has a happily ever after. I loved that Raymond said, you know, when Rakosi was, what the devil are you doing here? And he says, very likely the same thing you are. Like, I'm not telling you anything.
Right.
Very
Right.
likely it's the same thing you are. I don't know what you're planning on doing, but
Yeah. I loved it. And Joan breaks away from this comp because he's distracted,
yeah.
and goes into Michael's arms. And the comp is just like, WTF? Like, is this a
Where are all
freaking
these people
party up
coming
in this
from?
place?
Yes,
Everybody's just dropping in
this
to
is
my
my special
plan.
place.
Yeah, like, where are all these people coming from? And
Yes.
and I love the body language too between Michael and Joan. Notice they never stop touching each other. Like she stays in his arms, then
Hmm.
they're holding hands. Like it's like this constant
Always.
being in
Yeah.
around each other's aura, like, without even
Hmm.
like consciously being aware that they're doing it. So here's our next clip for B. So I guess push. Okay. Come on.
Joan thought she might faint from sheer relief. Her knees wobbled from terror and exhaustion, but she summoned enough strength to wrench free of the Count and run, stumbling into Michael's arms. He grabbed her and hauled her away from the Count, half dragging her. The Count made an angry sound and took a step in Joan's direction. But Michael said, "Stop there, you wicked bugger," just as the little froggy-faced man said
The
sharply,
froggy
"Stop."
face man.
The Count swung toward first one and then the other. He looked crazed. Joan followed and nudged Michael, urging him toward the chamber's door, only then noticing the penknife in his hand. "What are you going to do with that?" she whispered. "Shave him." "Let the air out of him," Michael muttered. He lowered his hand but didn't put the knife away and kept his eyes on the two men. "Your daughter," the Count said hoarsely to the man who called himself Master Raymond. "You were looking for a lost daughter. I found her for you." Ramon's brows shot up and he glanced at Joan. "Mine?" he said, astonished. "She isn't one of mine.
Hmm.
Can't you tell?" The Count drew a breath so deep it cracked in his throat. "Tell, but..." The frog looked impatient. "Can you not see auras? The electrical fluid that surrounds people," he elucidated, waving a hand around his own head. The Count rubbed a hand hard over his face. "I can't. For goodness sake, come in here." Ramon stepped to the edge of the star, reached across, and seized the Count's hand. Rakutsi stiffened at the touch. Blue light exploded from their linked hands, and he gasped, feeling a surge of energy such as he had never before experienced. Ramon pulled hard, and Rakutsi stepped across the line into the pentagram. Silence. The buzzing had stopped. He nearly wept with the relief of it.
And so the addendum comes in here and he says, you, he stammered, looking at the linked hands where the blue light now pulsed gently with the rhythm of a beating heart. Connection. He felt the other, felt him in his blood, felt him in his bones. An astonished exultation filled him. Another, by God, another. So were you impressed that Joan was able to make a joke about Michael shaving the comp with a penknife in such a like
Yes.
tense moment? She does seem like the person that like turns to humor, like
Mm.
turns to just like rambling and saying things because she's freaked out. You know what I mean? Like
Oh,
she's one of those types. And what about Michael's response saying that he let the air out of him? What did you think of that exchange?
I loved I love Joan. Like I'm just all in on the Joan train. She reminds me actually a lot of TV Marcelly. You know how you just can't
Oh
get enough
yeah.
of TV Marcelly and
Mhm.
like just her banter and how I always joke like that's who I want to hang out with at a party. Like she's always
Yes,
like she's so witty
absolutely.
and everything. So this is
Mhm.
in this bit Joan reminded me of her. And then Michael, letting the air out of him, I took as two ways. I took not only like letting the hot air out of this guy who just keeps talking, but also, just making sure that he could jab him right there to literally let the air out of him, like make him not be able to breathe. You could do that with a penknife, maybe.
Yeah, sure. um, I said, that the making the joke is her way of kind of, I think, releasing some of her pent up fear and trying to still be
Hmm.
brave in it, by
Hmm.
making a joke out of it. And I think the fact that she rushes into Michael's arms like shows how scared she truly was
Yes.
inside.
Yes.
What do you think about the buzzing of the stone stopping as soon as the comp entered the pentagram?
That blew me away when he said he nearly wept with the relief of it because, it
Mm-hmm.
was so strong and everything.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I didn't fully understand it because I felt like the buzzing happens until something, but I think it felt like to me that was Master Raymond really being able to even control more aspects of what's going on, you know. Still so much the comp is still learning and trying and experimenting,
Right.
and I just felt like Master Raymond, because not only did the buzzing stop, but it was like that silence wall, you know. Joan and Michael couldn't hear what they were
see them
saying.
talking. Couldn't hear what they were saying, because I get the impression that somehow through whatever the Raymond did with this pentagram, that pentagram just became like a wall to block out sound. You know, blocked out
I took it as a Raymond thing.
Took out the block, but it's not just the pentagram itself. It had to be something he did with it, because the Comte always had the pentagram. It never stopped for him. You know what I mean?
Yes.
When he would get into it, put the stones on there.
Exactly. Mm-hmm.
So I definitely like think he did something, but it's kind of cool that, you know, like another little magic element, you know.
Mm-hmm.
And so also before I play this next bit, I have to apologize because I mistakenly, back when we did the other interaction between the Comte and Raymond, I said then that it's like, okay, so he kind of makes it clear that he's the father of all time travelers, and I was wrong, because that's what happens in this section, and I had it mixed up. So I kind of spoiled you on that little iota, so I'm sorry about that.
It's okay.
So anyway, but anyway, that comes out in this section. Where are we at here? 5. Okay.
You didn't know? Ramon looked surprised. That you were He waved at the pentagram. I thought you might be. Not that, Ramon said almost gently. That you were one of mine. Yours. Rakutsi looked down again. The blue light was pulsing gently now, surrounding their fingers. Everyone has an aura of some kind, Ramon said, but only my people have this. In the blessed silence, it was possible to think again, and the first thing that came to mind was the Star Chamber, the king looking on as they had faced each other over a poisoned cup. And now he knew why the fog hadn't killed him. His mind bubbled with questions. La Dame Blanche, Blue Light, Mélisande, and Madeleine. Thought of Madeleine and what grew in her womb nearly stopped him, but the urge to find out, to know at last, was too strong. Can we, go forward? Ramon hesitated a moment, then nodded. Yes, but it's not safe. Not safe at all. Will you show me? I mean it. The frog's grip tightened on his. It's not a safe thing to know, let alone to do. Rakutsi laughed, feeling all at once exhilarated, full of joy. Why should he fear knowledge? Perhaps the passage would kill him, but he had a pocket full of gems. And besides, what was the point of waiting to die slowly? Tell me, he said, squeezing the other's hand, for the sake of our shared blood.
So a couple thoughts, Mary, on what Raymond said on the auras and the difference between what Raymond sees and what the Comte sees.
Mm-hmm.
What are your thoughts on that? Because go ahead.
Keep going. Oh no, I just thought it put the Comte in his place so much. You know, that he thinks he's so smart and he's figuring all these things out. And you see him throughout this novella, like being Mr. You know, like I'm in charge of all this. And then, like you said, every time he's with Raymond, it's off kilter. And there's Raymond like, can you not see this? Like, you can't see this? I thought you okay, all right, you're less than I thought you were. Sucks to suck, you know, like, I was like, no, I can't see it. What are you even talking about, man? Like, we're time travelers? Like, it's bad.
I'm just a wee little, I'm not the master, he's like the master.
Like,
and I
JV
think
team.
Comte has to kind of know, like, this dude is way, like, above where we are. Wait, screw Melisande, she don't know crap compared to this dude. I'm pitching my ride with this dude.
Exactly.
But I think as far as the auras go, I think the fact that what it is I think that varies. The power of that varies between people. some people just can see it, like Raymond. And I think because he's like has every power in
Oh yeah.
exponentially. So he can just look at a person, see their aura. But I think with the Comte, he has to touch the person. You know what I mean? And so
Yes.
when he says, "Can't you just see this?" And then when he touched them, that's when he saw the blue light explode between
Yeah.
them and all that stuff. But he can't do it by look. You know, like he
Yeah.
doesn't have that power. So I think that was the difference in there. You know what I mean? Of why one sees is different than the other one. Why do you think he says it's not a safe thing to know how to go forward? Why, like, does the mere knowledge of it pose a threat? Is it just the fact that knowing presents a temptation to do it? The act of doing it is risky to one's life? Does having the knowledge being found out by others, to have that knowledge put somebody at risk? Like, why does he say it's even a risk to even know how to do it? More
I
or less
think,
to do it.
yeah, I think because it is something bad has to happen to go forward, in my opinion. And so just it's that desire. You know, okay, I'll tell you how to do it. It's really bad though, and you shouldn't do it. But once you know how to do it, you still might want to try it. You might think, oh, well, maybe it'll be okay for me, or maybe I can find a way around it. It's
Of
that,
course, well, you know the Comte would, you know?
yeah,
Um,
exactly.
so here, Raymond seems to verify he's the father of time travelers, and that that if they have this certain blue field that he sees, they are his.
Yes.
What do you think the Comte feels about being a descendant of Raymond and sharing blood with this little froggy dude? You
Oh
know,
my
that
gosh.
he has kind of seen as a competitor, as a foe, you know, somewhat a frenemy or whatever you want to call it.
Yeah.
Um,
I
you
feel like that
know,
all goes away. Like it's all
okay.
like, oh
You
my
think he's
gosh,
happy
yay.
about that? Then he's
I
like,
I think he would be
he
happy
thinks
about
it's
it.
great. Okay.
Yeah.
And when the comp says now he knew why the frog didn't kill him,
hmm
okay, do you think that is that inherent in him saying that is the idea that he holds the bloodline sacred? Like if he knows that something is of his bloodline, he would never hurt that either because he
Yes.
has that same value system. Like
Yes.
he wouldn't harm an ancestry or a descendant himself or whatever because
Oh, that the
he's
comp?
the comp. Like if he
Uh,
was with a descent, like because he says now I know why he didn't hurt me because I'm a descendant. So
yeah, I feel like he would still
it
hurt
kind of
Claire.
like
I think he would still hurt Claire.
yeah, if he knew that she comes from him, if she's a downline from him, that he's her ancestor.
But she might be like a different fork in the road. If he
Okay.
finds out that, yeah, I feel like if it's a competitive kind
Because
of
it's his
cousin thing,
progeny. I think he has respect for that. For the fact that he
yeah,
says, now that I know that Raymond,
yeah,
I know why Raymond didn't kill me now. I think it's because he knows he has the same kind of respect for if this is my blood. You know what I mean?
okay,
I
okay.
think that's my impression, but I want to know what you thought. Um, so C13, it says June stood stock still, and I love that Michael's arm is still around Joan. Yeah,
Yes.
you know, and they see them talking, but there's no sound. It's like a barrier has been created. So I'm going to play this
hmm
next bit. It's a
Joan
short
stood
bit.
stock still, amazed. Michael's arm was still around her, but she scarcely noticed. He is? She whispered. He truly is. They both are. Of what? Michael gaped at her. Old folk. Fairies. He looked wildly back at the scene before them. The two men stood face to face, hands locked together, their mouths moving in animated conversation, in total silence. It was like watching minds, but even less interesting. I don't care what they are. Loons, criminals, demons, angels, come on. He dropped his arm and seized her hand, but she was planted, solid as an oak sapling, her eyes growing wide and wider. She gripped his hand hard enough to grind the bones and shrieked at the top of her lungs, "Don't do it!" He whirled round just in time to see them vanish.
And then the addendum says that his coat exploded in a shower of sparks.
Yeah.
And so your thoughts, Mary, there's like so all this drama now, they disappear. It seems like Raymond is taking him forward, don't you think? Like that's the
Yes, that's how
impression
I
you
took
get.
it. hmm
What do you think? What do you think about that?
Like, okay, you just said, like, you pulled the blood card. Like, that's how I took it, where he's like, please, just for the fact that we're related, please take me. Okay,
Yeah.
I'll show you.
What do you think Joan is saying don't do it about? I have a wag on that we'll get to when we get to the wag part,
Ooh.
but
I felt like she was even saying that to Master Raymond, like, don't do it, don't teach
oh,
him.
now that's an idea. That's an idea too. Oh, I like that, Mary. I didn't even think that way, but that's good. So section 14, Michael and Joan stumble out hand in hand down the tunnels, and Michael is trying to make sense of it. He's like, it has to be trickery, it had to be fireworks, and all this stuff. But Joan's just in a state of shock from what happened and so forth. She's just in a state of shock, and they finally get to the ladder. And Michael lets her go up first, and then he worries that, he's skiing up her shirt, which is so cute. It was adorable. And Joan's like too shocked to care, whatever. Yeah. And so she asks if he thinks they were the old folk or fairies. And he doesn't really want to think too hard about it because he thinks like if any Auntie Claire might be one,
Mm-hmm.
And this is where we get this final lovely scene. And by the way, the gods, aka Diana in this case, must have smiled by letting the wind blow the opposite direction, so they smelled the nice piney woods instead of
you're right.
The death of the cemetery blowing in their face for this lovely, poignant, romantic little scene.
Yes.
So yes, that was nice. I mean, it would have kind of spoiled the mood to have death and decay all around as you're like, having this first little kiss or
heart
whatever.
To heart, yeah.
Yeah. So that was good of her.
Thanks, Diana. Smell memory is strong.
He looked at her face so as not to risk her modesty. She was looking better now, but very serious. Were they old folk, fairies? I suppose they must have been. His mind was moving.
Kimberly says she wants to see this on screen.
He motioned to her to climb and followed her up, his eyes tightly shut. If they were old ones, then likely so was Auntie Claire. He truly didn't want to think about that. He drew the fresh air gratefully into his lungs. The wind was toward the city now, coming off the fields, full of the resinous, cool scent of pine trees and the breath of grass and cattle. He felt Joan breathe it in, sigh deeply, and then she turned to him, put her arms around him, and rested her forehead on his chest.
Yes.
He put his arms round her, and they stood for some time in peace. Finally, she stirred and straightened up. "You'd best take me back then," she said. "The sisters will be half out of their minds." He was conscious of a sharp sense of disappointment, but turned immediately toward the coach standing in the distance. Then he turned back. "You sure?" he said. "Did your voices tell you to go back?" She made a sound that wasn't quite a rueful laugh. "I didn't need a voice to tell me that." She brushed a hand through her hair, smoothing it off her face. "In the Highlands, if a man's widowed, he takes another wife as soon as he can get one. He's got to have someone to mend his shirt and rear his bairns. But Sister Philomene says there's different in Paris, that a man might mourn for a year." "He might," he said, after a short silence. Would a year be enough, he wondered, to heal the great hole where Lily had been? He knew he would never forget, never stop looking for her. But he didn't forget what Ian had told him either. But after a time, you find you're in a different place than you were, a different person than you were. And then you look about and see what's there with you. You'll maybe find a use for yourself. Joan's face was pale and serious in the moonlight, her mouth gentle. "It's a year before a postulant makes up her mind whether to stay and become a novice or leave. It takes time to know." "Aye," he said softly. "Aye, it does." He turned to go, but she stopped him, a hand on his arm. "Michael," she said, "kiss me, aye? I think I should maybe know that before I decide."
I think you should.
Yeah, girl.
This end.
So, I love it. It's so cute. I love the way
Yes.
Joan says what she thinks. That was bold of Joan to do that.
It
And
was. That
you
was all
know,
in her court.
and she's telling Michael that he has to grieve, and like she like holds her feeling. I think she's having feelings, but she recognizes like
Hmm.
we each need to kind of give this space, give it
Yes,
the space
yes.
between.
Hey.
Um, and she was kind of forward for a little meek nun. I like that Joan and Michael
I
seem to
agree.
understand each other here, and
Hmm.
they both recognize there's a need for time, but they both also recognize their attraction for each other. I think
Hmm.
here, I love that moment where they're just holding each other with her head to his
Oh,
chest. So sweet. I kind of wonder whether Mother Hildegard will sense Joan is not meant to be a nun and kind of
probably.
prompt her a little. And what do you think about Madeline? That's another question that's out there. Do you have any other thoughts, Mary? And what was your overall honeypot rating and thoughts for the story as a whole?
My overall, okay, so, in regards to Mother Hildegard, her being
Start
an
putting
old
your B
one.
questions and
Oh,
theories down,
yes.
guys. This is the time.
This is your
This is the
announcement.
time.
Yes. Put that little
And
B
we won't be
emoji
able
in
to do
your,
too many because we're a little bit beyond, and I know Mary can't stay long, but we'll do what we can, okay?
thank you.
Mary will be in charge of it. She's in charge of reading them, so she'll be in charge of it.
I'll do it.
Um,
Yeah, do I think Mother Hildegard is an old one? I don't
oh,
know. That would
I
be
didn't ask that.
lovely.
I just was giving an example on the thing.
Oh,
No, I
oh.
just want to know what your overall rating right now. That's all I'm
Oh,
asking
it
you
would be a
now.
big old five. It would be a big.
Big,
I loved this story. It was so fun. You got to be with all the magic. Got to be with some characters who was so excited to see again and spend some time with. So yeah, this is a five honey
yes,
pot for me.
it's a five for me too.
Hmm.
Um, did the intro, because this was like a thing that's debated. I told you this before. Did the intro of so much supernatural element in this story enhance or diminish the story by some people feel it diminishes it by giving it easy outs for things by just saying, oh, well, it's just magic, it's just supernatural, blah, blah, blah. It makes it where it's harder. It's easier for like you to explain something by just tossing it off as magic. That's why they don't like it. Do you think it makes it better, enhances it? I know you probably think it enhances it, so I do too.
Yeah, I'm all in when it comes to the magic, particularly because of Master Raymond. Like there is so much that we don't know about time travel and all of this kind of magical side of everything that he
Mhm.
seems to have a very good grasp on. So because he's in this story, I'm okay with there being some things that we don't necessarily understand because
Okay.
maybe that gets answered.
Yeah. You have any wags or thoughts for bees from this story that like spark your imagination or just overall wags about like how this like illuminated something that now like makes you think a different thing about the whole picture of the series or for what you expect in bees as a result of things you learned in this.
I gotta say, it makes me think that we will see the comp again. We've talked about it sparingly through this, but for it to be along that same timeline that you were mentioning, and for him to have so much interest in Claire, I wouldn't be surprised if he or if just more time travelers who have different knowledge. Maybe it's not him, but maybe it's people who bump into Claire as well. Maybe we meet someone else in this book that has the blue aura, who can do the
Yeah.
same things, but knows it in a different way. So it just kind of expanded that what we know is just the tip of the iceberg.
Right, right. Um, any other thoughts for bees that you
Oh,
have?
just oh my God. As I said, I would love to have either some more of the comp or I'd love to meet another time traveler. Um,
I love to have
Obviously,
word on Michael and Joan.
oh, we need that. We need to have some closure with Fergus. We need to
Yes,
like get to that, of
yes,
course. Um,
absolutely.
if we get a note from Mother Hildegard, what if Mother Hildegard is the one that writes to them saying that Joan and Michael are
Oh,
married?
yeah, because that would be perfect because it was Claire's recommendation, so she might
Yes.
feel the need to have closure with Claire and explain what happened.
Yes.
Good
Let's tell
one, I like
Diana
it.
and make
I
sure
like
that this is
that. I
it. Go
like
back to the
that.
publishers if it's not in it.
Yes, I
Yeah.
like
So
that.
we have a couple of comments. If you wanted me to read that, or if you had something to say, you let me
Well,
know.
let me know. Yeah, no, let me say my wags,
Oh yes,
my
please.
couple wags that I want to say. I'm going to save some for the after buzz, but I want to say a few with you here.
Mhm.
Um, my overall thought on the story is that Space Between has these little bits of time travel, lots of information, great characters. It makes you want to know about what's, about Michael and Joan. I think it's a terrific element. Has all the elements like romance, mystery,
Yeah.
history, violence. Grief, joy, friendship. Because like really, it's friendship at this point.
Yeah.
And then Ian's words to Michael make like this really beautiful insight even into our life today and regular world, like something to remember in our lives
Yes.
today. That after like get through the difficult time. I'm going through a difficult time right now, so I appreciated like hearing that again.
Yes.
And it's appropriate now. It's like Diane is just a very wise woman with this whole story. And I have a few interesting wags and thoughts. So I have here's my first one. Will we get news of Joan and Michael? And like I said, I told you about the timing. I think we might get a letter or something in Bees with word of Michael and Joan marrying. I'm hoping so. And if so, like that's a type of thing, like I said, that wouldn't mean anything unless you read this story. But hearing that in a little letter will be like a wink, wink Easter egg to the people that have read this,
Yeah.
Maybe Joan will have a vision and warn Mother Claire about like the Comte or something like that and write to her, which I love that too. That's an idea. A lot can happen. Diana has said that Michael and Joan are not physically in this book. She said, we already have so many people coming in out of the woodwork. I can't have them too. But she said maybe book 10.
Okay.
So, it might be that like we get them when they're leaving from the French Revolution or something. She says it's already crowded, this book. And she says also Master Raymond likely won't appear, but she never said the same thing about the Comte. So another possibility that opens, if Raymond can transform his appearance, then there's nothing to say we haven't already seen him in disguise.
Oh my gosh.
He could be anyone. He could be male, female. He could be anyone. And if that's true, it kind of changes the whole game. You know what I mean? Like, you don't know who he is. He could be anyone.
He could have been the White Sow.
And so when we get his book in the whatever future, and it's going to tell like his little adventures all through time and all these like his descendants he runs into, we may find out like we didn't realize this person was actually the Comte that we like view in the story. Wouldn't that be cool?
That would be so amazing.
The other thing I have is a prognostication on where they went. This is like a total wag, like wild ass guess. It's not like I'm not like take bunkered on it, but this is the thought. If he went forward, okay, is he the one that's involved in whatever's coming after Brie in the future time? In that whole nother plot. You've read Moby, right?
Yeah. Oh my gosh.
So that whole nother plot that's happening with Brie.
Yes.
Did he go forward and now he's going after Brie in the future? And he's behind that whole nutters.
That is wild.
And that was why Joan said, don't do it. Because it,
Oh my gosh.
Wow. Isn't that juicy?
That would be awesome. That would be, yes, very juicy and amazing.
Okay, let's get some off the board, and then leave me like 10 minutes that I need to do the leaf intro, and then we'll be done. So I'm letting you decide. So you read the ones off the board.
Diane says, do you think that there is any significance to the order, the color meaning of the torches? To me, it was different chemicals that could burn for various lengths of time. So like when he first went in, he used green or something. Maybe whatever chemical it was using, that would burn the longest. And different torches would have a shorter burnout period because he knows he needs them to like come back out. So that's what I thought. In addition to ambiance.
Ambiance. And it seemed like he had a very specific, I think it was yellow, that he went to go into the portal room. Yeah. So it seemed like that was like a specific thing he chose. They like my wag I'm seeing on the board. Okay, the one about the Comte, I guess they're like, ooh, okay.
Janine says, do you think the Comte took care or watched the children that he sired? Does he teach them about time travel?
Oh, I don't know. What do you think?
I'm still mixed opinions on him, but Maybe he now is excited. I don't
Hey,
know. That's a really good question.
Melisande taught him, like
Yeah, true.
pass it on,
Yeah, keep it in the family.
That's right. It only
Mary
takes a
Hughes.
spark to get a
Yeah,
fire going.
it's true. Gonna have a whole bunch of them just bumping into each other on the pentagrams all the time. Oh, it's a family reunion! Yay! Mary Hughes says, "Do you think the reference to the Comte being with Emily in the addendum is not in the latter book versions for a reason? Could Diana have changed her mind about Fergus's paternity?"
I don't think so. And I don't think it's not like she has said it's not for sure that he is the Comp's son. But I don't think that was because of that. I think it's just that she wanted to hold that card back a little bit and not put it widespread because she wanted to create more mystery around it. So
Oh, cool.
it was
Yeah.
already, that's what I think. But anything else?
Janine agrees that, we're not going to see Michael and Joan and Bees, but she thinks after that, especially before the French Revolution, just like you were saying, Angela, she thinks that they're going to end up in America and Michael would be the broker of whiskey, perhaps his Uncle Jamie's.
Oh, I like that. Start like
Yes.
a Fraser at sea or whatever
I love it.
in America.
Yeah, so
We got
that's what
room
we
for a
have
wine merchant in America. Okay, good.
right? That's what we
Um,
have for our little bees.
oh, perfect. Okay, so for Leaf on the Wind of All Hallows. Okay, so this was released in fall of 2010. And so it's a year after Echo was released, and it was while she was writing Moby. It came out before this book, A Space Between.
Okay.
It was originally for an anthology put together by George R.R. Martin called Songs of Love and Death, and it was Tales of Star-Crossed Lovers. Okay, so that's what this is. It tells the story of Roger's young parents in World War II. It takes place starting in October 1941. The title is referencing Jerry being blown like a leaf on the wind. Jerry is Roger's father.
Mm-hmm.
It also references, there's also a reference, it also references the Oak Leaf Cluster Award, which is given to bravery for flyers in World War II.
Oh, nice.
So it's like an oak leaf, that you get like metal. So he's like a leaf on the wind of All Hallows,
Oh, wow.
And he actually like travels on Halloween, on October 31st, 1941. So you've read Moby where you see that picked up. Now that hadn't come out yet. So this tells some of that story from Jerry's POV.
Okay. Sorry,
and
so
it basically told us that before we actually got the other story.
Yeah.
So it kind of spoiled people when this first came out.
Oh my
this
gosh.
is like them. This is where they went, because like they left basically Roger and Buck not knowing what the hell happened to them.
Yes.
They kind of leave and we don't know where they went. And so when we got this story, it came out before that story. Like these two strangers come across him and so forth. You're seeing that, and like people start to figure out, oh, that's probably
they piece it together.
They figure it out, but it was like we didn't get the whole story of it, the other side of it, until Moby.
Until Moby came out, yeah.
Yeah. And so in Outlander, we find out Roger was orphaned during World War II. This is now I want to show you because there's 4 books that all kind of piece it and throw into this story. So in Outlander, you find out Roger was orphaned during World War II, adopted by Reverend Wakefield. What do you recall? Do you recall all the pieces that we've learned about Roger's parents so far?
You can piece it all a bit more for me. Bring it, yeah.
And he was adopted by Roger Wakefield. The Reverend tells Claire and Frank that Roger's father was a Spitfire pilot who was shot down over the English Channel, and that his mother died in the Blitz and the London bombings that followed that.
Yeah.
In Drums of Autumn, Roger tells Brianna that his mother died in the tube station that she was sheltering in during a bombing a couple years after his father died. And then in Fiery Cross, we get some detail that I want to tell you about real quick. He remembers in this part where he's looking at his son, Roger, I'm talking about. He remembers, he thinks clever lad, and he remembers his mother calling him clever lad. And he says, go on, be clever, he said slowly, echoing, because he can barely remember. She was asking him if he remembers his parents. And he says, well, my father died when I was a baby. and I only saw him, basically, I only came in contact with him once when he came home for a visit, which we're going to see in this thing. But he said, my mother, she died when I was 4. So this is where he's talking about that. And he says, he says, you talk about your dad now and then, but I've never heard you mention your mother before. He gave a one-shouldered shrug, bringing his knees up against the yielding backs of her thighs. I don't remember a lot about her. How old were you when she died? Brianna's hand floated up. Oh, 4, I think, nearly 5. She said in sympathy. And so then she asked if you think if we die, will our kids remember us, etc. And so then he says, she says, but you do remember your mother, don't you? At least a little bit. She sounded slightly anxious, and she wanted him to remember. He hesitated, and a thought struck him with a small shock. The truth of it was, he realized, that he never consciously tried to remember his mother. The realization gave him a sudden and unaccustomed feeling of shame. She died in the war, didn't she? Bree's hand rested on him. Yes, in the Blitz, a bomb. In Scotland? But I thought, no, in London. He didn't really want to speak of it. He never had spoken of it. On the rare occasion when memory led in that direction, he veered away. That territory lay behind a closed door with a large sign, no entry, a sign that he had never sought to pass. Yet tonight he felt the echo of Bree's grief, anguish at the thought that her son might not recall her. And he felt the same echo, like a voice calling from the woman locked behind the door, in his mind. But it was locked. With a hollow feeling behind his breastbone that he might have been dread, he reached out, put his hand on the knob of that closed door. How much did he recall? My mother's mom, was English, he said slowly, a widow. We went south to live with her in London when my dad was killed. He had not thought of Gran any more than his mom in years, but with his speaking he could smell the rose water and glycerin lotion that his grandmother had used on her hands, the faintly musty smell of her upstairs flat in Tottenham Court Road, crammed with horsehair furniture too large for it, remnants of a previous life that had a house and a husband. He took a deep breath. Bree felt it and passed a broad, firm courage on his chest. So the door did crack open a bit. A little bit of wintry London afternoon shone through it, lighting up a stack of battered wooden blocks on a threadbare carpet. A woman's hand was building a tower with them. Faint sun scattering on the rainbows up from a diamond on her hand. His own fingers curled in reflex, seeing that slim hand. Mum, my mother, she was small, like Gran. That is, they both seemed like big to me, but I remember seeing her stand on her tiptoes to reach things down from the shelf. And then he's remembering things on the shelf. And he says, my God, he had never seen different things like that again. And he says, I know what she looked like, mostly from pictures, not my own memories. But he did have memories, he realized, and disturbing scene in his pit of his stomach. He thought Mum, and suddenly he didn't have the photos anymore. He saw the chain of her spectacles, a string of tiny metal beads against the soft curve of her breast, a pleasant warm smoothness smelling of soap against his cheek, the cotton fabric of a flowered house dress, blue flowers shaped like trumpets with curling vines. He could see them clearly. What did she look like? Did you look like her at all? He shrugged, and Bree shifted. Her eyes shone in the dark. A little, he said. Her hair was dark like mine, shiny, curling, lifting in the wind, sprinkled with white grains of sand. He sprinkled the sand on her hand, and she brushed it from her hair, laughing. A beach somewhere. The Reverend kept pictures of her in his study. One showed her holding me on her lap. I don't know what we were looking at, but both of us looked as though we were trying to keep from laughing. We look a lot alike in that one. I have her mouth, I think, and maybe the shape of her brows. For a long time he had felt tightness in his chest when he saw the picture of his mother. But then it had passed, the pictures lost their meaning and became no more than objects in the casual clutter of the Reverend's house. And the temptation to give in and let him carry painless away was great, but while Brianna's fears were eased for the moment, he still heard that whisper. He wouldn't remember me at all, and it came now from the other side of the door in his mind. Yes, I do, Mom, he thought, and shoved it all the way open. I was with her, he said softly. This is the part I want you to hear. He was on his back, staring up at the pine beam ceiling. What? With who? He could hear the lull of sleep in her voice, but curiosity roused her briefly. With my mother and my grandmother, when the bomb. He heard her head turn sharply toward him, hearing the strain in his voice, but he looked straight upward into the dark roof beams, not blinking. Do you want to tell me? Bree's hand found his, curled around it, squeezing. He wasn't sure at all that he did, but he nodded a little, squeezing back. I suppose I must, he said softly, sighing deeply, smelling the lingering scent of the fried corn mush. It was at night. Air raid sirens went. I knew what it was, but it scared the shit out of me every time. There wasn't time to dress. Mom pulled me out of bed, put my coat on over my pajamas, and we rushed out down the stairs. There were 30 steps. I counted them all that day. Coming home from the shops, we hurried to the nearest shelter. The nearest shelter for them was a tube station across the street, grubby white tiles and the flicker of fluorescent lights, thrilling rush of air somewhere deep below, like the breathing of dragons in nearby caves. It was exciting. He could see the crush of people, hear the shouting of wardens over the noise of the crowd. Everything was vibrating, the floors, the walls, the air itself. Feet thundered on the wooden treads as streams of refugees poured into the bowels of the earth, down one level to a platform, down to another, yet another, burrowing towards safety. It was panic, but orderly panic. The bombs could go through 50 feet of earth, but the lower levels were safe. They had reached the bottom of the first stairway, run jostling with a mass of others through a short white tile tunnel to the head of the next. There was a wide space at the head of the stairway, and the crowd pulled in a swirling eddy into it, swelling with the pressure of refugees pouring in the tunnel behind, draining only slowly as a thin stream crowded onto the stair leading down. There was a wall round the head of the stair. I could hear Gran worrying that I would be crushed against it. People were pouring down in from the street, pressing from behind. He could just see over the wall, standing on his toes, chest pressed against the concrete. Down below, emergency lights shone in interrupted streaks along the walls, stripping the milling crowd below. It was late night. Most of the people were dressed in whatever they had been able to seize when the siren went, and the light glowed on the unexpected flashes of bare flesh and extraordinary garments. One woman sported an extravagant hat decorated with feathers and fruit and worn atop an ancient overcoat. He had been watching the crowd below in fascination, trying to see if it was really a whole pleasant pheasant on that hat. There was shouting, an air raid warden, a white helmet with a black W, beckoning madly, trying to hasten the already rushing crowd toward the far end of the platform, making room for those coming off the stair. There were children crying, but not me. I wasn't really afraid at all. He hadn't been afraid because Mum was holding his hand. If she was there, nothing bad could happen. There was a big thump nearby. I could see lights shake, and then there was a noise like something tearing overhead. Everyone looked up and began to scream. The crack through the slanted ceiling hadn't looked particularly frightening, just a thin black line that zigzagged back and forth like a jigsaw snake, following along the lines of the tiles. But then it widened suddenly, a gape maw-like, like a dragon's mouth, and dirt and tiles began to pour down. He had long since thawed, and yet every hair on his body rippled now with goose flesh. His heart pounded against the inside of his chest, and he felt as though that noose had drawn tight around his neck again. She let go, he said in a strangled whisper. She let go of my hand. Brianna's hand gripped in both of hers hard, trying to save the child that he had been. She had to, she said in an urgent voice. Roger, she wouldn't have let go unless she had to. No, he shook his head violently. That's not what I mean. I mean, wait a minute, okay? He blinked hard, trying to slow his breathing, fitting back the shattered pieces of that night. Confusion, frenzy, pain. But what had actually happened? He kept nothing save an impression of bedlam. But he had lived through it. He must know what had happened, if he could just bring himself to live through it again. Brianna's hand clutched his, her fingers still squeezing tight enough to stop the blood. He patted her hand gently, and her grip relaxed a little. He closed his eyes and let it happen. I didn't remember at first, he said at last quietly, or rather I did, but I remember what people told me that happened. He had had no memory of being carried unconscious through the tunnel once rescued, and he had spent several weeks being shuttled around aid shelters and foster homes where other orphans, mute and terrified with bewilderment. I knew my name, of course, and my address, but that didn't help much under the circumstances. My dad had already gone down anyway by the time the 8 people located Grant's brother, that was the Reverend. He came to fetch me. They pieced together the story of what happened in the shelter. It was a miracle that I hadn't been killed with everyone else on the stair, he told me. They told me that they said that my mother must have somehow lost hold of me in the panic. I must have been separated from her and carried down the stair by the crowd. That's how I ended up on the lower level where the roof hadn't given way. Brianna's hand was still curled over his, protective but no longer squeezing. But now you remember what happened? She asked quietly. I did remember her letting go of my hand, and so I thought the rest of it was right, too, but it wasn't. She let go of my hand, he said. The words came more easily now. Tightness in his throat and chest was gone. She let go of my hand, and then she picked me up. That small woman, she picked me up and threw me over the wall, down into the crowd of people on the platform below. I was knocked mostly out by the fall, I think, but I remember the roars the roof went. No one on the stairs survived. He said, it's all right. It's all right. And he was crying. We won't forget, not Jem, not me, no matter what, we won't forget. So that's what we know. And then in Echo, we get a flashback, and Claire and Roger discuss their parents. Roger tells her that the plane went down over the channel October 31st, 1941. Claire notes that in a letter from Frank during the war, he mentioned that the Spitfire had crashed in Northumbria, that the plane was found, but the pilot was not. The pilot's name had been Jeremiah, same as Roger's father. And Claire adds that there are stone circles all over that area. And the story shook Roger's faith a bit, and he struggles a bit in Echo because of that. So then this story comes out, and then Moby comes out, and we get Roger and Buck's interaction with Jerry from their perspective. But this came out first, and before we knew any of that. So don't worry, there's still plenty of interesting things about this story to learn, even though you know what happens in Moby. It also is one of the very shortest stories by Diana. I think that the only one that's shorter is the First Lord John story, but I do think it's the most poignant of her novella stories. I've read it many times, so I still get teary at the end every time. So hopefully I'll be able to talk about it without crying when I get there. One of the things to pay attention to is the new shades of Frank that you'll get in this story. How much of Roger we see reflected in his parents, like you can see all the little genetic cues. And interesting that this story is kind of set up with 4 books and little smatterings over 4 books that kind of create what happens in this story, and all the pages that are there. So we're wrapping this up. That's my little intro for this. So just to kind of get you up to speed on what we've known so far. If you can stay, we'll be starting a second solo in about 8 to 10 minutes for our after buzz. Lots of cool stuff to discuss. Our next Moby Beehive will be this Sunday, 3 p.m. Uncover chapters 19 to 22, getting one step closer to that potting shed rumpy pumpy. Are you excited about this story, Mary?
Oh,
ready for some World War II action?
Yes, completely different from being where we were, of course, in France. So I'm really, really pumped.
All right. Well, go ahead. You have the close there, Mary.
I closed my computer when I was
listening to you. Join us next Wednesday as we cover the first half of A Leaf on the Wind of All Hollows. And thank you for coming, everyone.
Yes, thank you. Bye, Angela. Bye, everyone.
Bye, everyone.